Am I still a guest?
You were certainly on, but I can't see your face to tell you. But we are now live.
Diana, you're a guest.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. White.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is 4:05, members. Can I introduce the Mayor? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I need to remind members that this is a virtual meeting and it's the first council meeting held through Teams and it is being live streamed. The virtual meeting protocol, which has been circulated many times, will underpin how this meeting is conducted. Firstly, I'd like to say, because there are still issues with people's systems, that if we can keep the videos off until anybody wants to speak, then you can turn it on, turn it off again. Don't use the hand system on this one. Stick to what we've done in the past, which is actually use the chat box. So if you want to ask a question, just write question. And if you want to get to debate, just say debate. And we'll try and keep up. We have what I would say is a smaller box to work with. So I'm hoping that Mr. White will help me keep up. So, Mr. White, apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon. We have apologies from Councillors Hayworth and Wood for this afternoon's meeting. And just for those listening in on the streaming, Councillors Ball and Ridges are trying to join us as we speak, and Councillor Coulson is hoping to join us, but may well be late. But in terms of formal apologies, they're just from Councillors Hayworth and Wood. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item 2, confirmation of minutes. One set of minutes, 22nd of September, to be approved as true and correct. Correct record of that meeting. So if those who are in attendance, if you are all happy, it was a true record of that meeting. If you have any concerns, if you can write in the chat box, please. If not, we'll note this by exception.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't see anyone typing in the chat box, so I think we can assume that they are unanimously carried. Thank you, members.
Thank you. Can I also just say, if we can have, I don't want to see any other comments, please, from now in the chat box, because I'd say it's a small box and it's going to be difficult to keep up with at the best of times without any extra chats. Item 3, declarations of interest. I invite members to declare any personal or disclosable pecuniary interests. Any declarations will need to state if the interest is personal or a disclosable pecuniary and the nature of that interest. Again, if there's anybody who has an interest, just write interest in the chat box.
Just giving it a couple of seconds, Mr. Mayor, but I can't see anyone typing in the box. No, I think we can assume that no members have an interest to declare at this stage. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Right. Item 4, business brought forward by me. I need to there isn't anything coming forward from me, but I need to advise the members that whilst not an urgent item, the Invest to Earn Committee minutes arising from the meeting held on the 2nd of October 2020 will be presented to the Council as a new agenda item at item 5, small v. So that's just for noting. Item 5, committee minutes. A, Development Management and Licensing Committee meeting. This is the 29th of September 2020, 27th of October 2020, and 24th of November 2020. And I'd like to ask Councillor Yellen to present said minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the minutes of the meetings of the Development Management and Licensing Committee held on 29th of September, 27th of October and 24th of November 2020 be received and noted, with the exception of recommendation DML 33. They are DML 14 to DML 19, DML 20 to DML 15, and DML 28 to DML 37, and can be found between pages 9 and 10, 11 and 16, and 17 and 21 respectively. Could I have a seconder, please?
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Pearce here.
Thank you. I take this by exception. Is everybody happy? If it's anybody not happy with those minutes, if they can just type.
There's nobody typing, Mr. Mayor, so I think those can be noted. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Yelland.
So in respect of recommendation DML 33, I propose the following: that Council be recommended to adopt the draft licensing policy as set out at Appendix A of the agenda report presented to the committee meeting for the period from 7th of January 2021 to 6th of January 2026. Could I have a seconder, please?
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Pearce here.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
No questions, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Yelland.
So, Mr. Mayor, can I just check with that one if we can just take that on by exception if any members aren't willing to accept that recommendation? Thank you.
Yeah. So.
And once again, Mr. Mayor, there's nobody typing in the box that I can see, so we can assume that that recommendation is therefore declared carried. Thank you, members.
Thank you. Right. B, Overview and Scrutiny Committee, 6th of October 2020. Councillor Ewings, could you present this, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the minutes of the meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee held on the 6th of October 2020 be received and noted. They are ONS 23 to ONS 36 and can be found between pages 23 and 27. May I have a seconder, please?
I'm happy to second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Those who attended that meeting, or that's the council, are you happy that these are a true reflection of that meeting? Again, by exception, anyone who's against, please type.
That is noted. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Nice and quiet. C, Audit Committee meeting, 13th of October 2020. Councillor Davies, could you present, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the minutes of the meeting of the Audit Committee held on the 13th of October 2020 be received and noted. They are AC 10 to AC 18 and can be found between pages 29 and 31. Can I have a seconder, please?
I second that, Mr. Mayor.
Again, is everybody happy to note this?
That is noted. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. D, Hub Committee meeting, 20th of October 2020 and 1st of December 2020. I'd like to ask Councillor Jury to present, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the minutes of the meetings of the Hub Committee held on the 20th of October 2020 and the 1st of December 2020 be received and noted, with the exception of recommendations HC 27, HC 29, HC 40 and HC 41. They are HC 21 to HC 31 and HC 32 to HC 41 and can be found between pages 33 and 37 and 1 and 5 of the separate circulation. If I could have a seconder, please.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
So if we can have again by exception.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, before we do, Councillor Hipsey has given notice of a wish to ask a question.
Okay, thank you. Just as and sorry, just as a note, I tend to get two things up on the screen. I expect everybody else does. So, anyhow, yes, Councillor Hipsey, please.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. My question relates to HC 39, which talks about the housing strategy consultation paper. Unless I'm doing something wrong, I can't find that anywhere on the council website. I believe the consultation started yesterday. Perhaps somebody can either confirm or deny that for me, please.
Who would like to answer that one? Silence. Leader, do you have an answer to that, please?
I'm not sure that I have an answer. I think Mr. Hawke may be able to help us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Hipsey, the strategy consultation will now actually start this Friday. And we're just preparing all the information now to come out in the member bulletin to all members on Friday. But the consultation will start on Friday and it will still run for a period of 6 weeks.
Yeah, thank you very much. I believe that the minutes actually do say the 7th of December, but I guess that's okay. It's just obviously I'd like to be able to inform residents of when they can get involved. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hipsey.
Yeah, just to remind everyone, please don't use your hands. Just put it, and once your hand is up, you can take it down, please. Thank you. So, by exception, again, is everybody happy to note to date? Again, tell if you've got a problem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Those are duly noted, and we're now on to the recommendations. Thank you.
Councillor Jury, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In respect of recommendation HC 27, I propose the following: that the council be recommended to 1. Set the strategic intention to raise council tax by the maximum allowed in any given year without triggering a council tax referendum to endeavour to continue to deliver services. Note, the actual council tax for any given year will be decided by the council in the preceding February. 2. To continue to respond to the government consultations on business rates reform. 3.
Cheers. Bye.
Continue to actively lobby and engage with the government, Devon MPs, South West councils and other sector bodies such as the District Councils Network and the Rural Services Network for a realistic business rates baseline to be set for the council for 2022 onwards, when the business rates reset would happen. 4. Continue to lobby in support of the government eliminating negative revenue support grant in 2021-22 and thereafter, and continue to lobby for rural services delivery grant allocations which adequately reflected the cost of rural service provision. And 5. Maintain an upper limit on external borrowing for all council services as part of the medium-term financial strategy of £50 million. Please could I have a seconder for those recommendations?
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
There's nobody expressing interest to ask a question, Mr. Mayor. And of course, we are in debate as well. Councillor Renders has just expressed a wish to ask a question.
Sorry, I wasn't
Councillor-
quick enough on the finger typing there.
Carry on, please.
It's a very quick question. Just given that we're looking to increase revenues from this, and it's probably, I don't know if it's the right time to ask the question, but given the pandemic, given the problems that are going to be upon us financially, are we going to increase our, what's the word I'm thinking of, our percentage down of the amount of revenue we would actually collect? Because I don't know if that's going to be reflected in our accounts, if that makes sense. I haven't put that across very well at all. Our revenue for bad and doubtful debts, that's what I was thinking of. We're increasing, or hoping to increase the revenue, obviously, by put as much as we can. But given the economy at the minute and the amount of people that are possibly going to be unemployed, I have a concern that although we're increasing it, we're not actually going to get as much. Have we reflected this, and what do people think about that as a
thank
question?
you, Councillor Renders. Of course, that is something that we have thought about, and Mrs. Buckle and her team are factoring into their equations. We remain keeping an eye on how things are reacting this year in order to inform next year. But yes, it's something that's very much at the forefront of our minds, and clearly we will still be required to deliver a balanced budget no matter what happens. At the same time, the government support for lost revenue has been very effective and is being very effective this year, and will continue into part of next year as well. So all of those things will be factored in and will form part of the budget discussions that we'll have as members and with members between now and next February.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sellers, were any questions?
Yeah, no, it was very similar to Councillor Renders. Thanks. It was a comment when appropriate, please.
Okay. Thank you.
There are no other questions, Mr. Mayor, on the box, so I think we're now in debate. Thank you.
Yeah. So, debate. Councillor Sellers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Clearly, we have just heard what Councillor Renders has said. We're all aware of the deprivation, the hardships are worse in many areas, and I just want to know what we are going to do as a council to get the message out about how we are going to deliver services, and try and inform residents about what's going on. As a taxpayer, I am heartily fed up with all the council tax increases, and I have commented to local MP that the councils are given money with one hand and it's taken away with others, or that's the way I see it in many ways, and it's going to be a struggle. And with the unemployment, etc., it is a toxic brew. So what are we as a council going to do to try and clear the pathway and just get the message across to residents that we are not just wanting to increase council tax?
Thank you. We are in debate, but that was a question. So is anybody like to answer?
I'll have a go at answering that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
I think, Councillor Sellis, there will always be an ongoing debate in the run-up to setting a budget, and that will take place both with members, but I think also with explaining the reasons behind that. And I think we've done that pretty well in recent years, explaining the reasons behind budget increases. I think we've set that out quite well. I think adding to that, our communications during this period of the COVID emergency have been extremely good, and what we've got out to people has been extremely well received, culminating in a really successful, I hope, campaign to encourage residents to support their high streets in the run up to Christmas, which is currently going out. So I think the messaging that's been going out has been really, really good. And I think there is no reason why we shouldn't continue to do that and get our messages across about how efficient we're trying to be in difficult circumstances in the run up to setting the next budget. So that's certainly our intention, and I hope that will help.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
Apologies for taking a while to unmute my the microphone.
No problem.
My issue that I'd like to raise is the nebulous nature of Brexit. So on top of all the other things that we've been doing, how are we going to approach the possibility, and who knows whether it's true or false, of no deal?
I'm not sure if I should. We're actually debating these recommendations. Now, it's interesting to know if there is an answer that has any effect on these recommendations. So I'll pass this back to the leader, please.
I think the short answer is, Mr. Mayor, there probably isn't. We can only play what is in front of us. I think it remains to be seen what the economic effects of that might be, as much as the economic effects of the current COVID emergency. We'll obviously keep an eye on that. We will respond and react to government guidance, and we will, as we always have done, endeavour to cut our coat according to the cloth that we have available. So
A very fair answer. Thank you very
the
much.
specific point, but I think that's the best that I can do.
Thank you.
Councillor Cheadle's
Councillor-
on the list, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, he has. Unfortunately, he has been missed. But Councillor Cheadle.
I find that
Thank you
hard
very
to believe. No.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. My comment is that there is bound to be a degree of criticism of the council raising council tax by the maximum amount permitted without a referenda, given the sort of economic circumstances that many find themselves in. And that's absolutely natural, and I'd be surprised if it didn't happen. But I think it'd be important to make the point when responding to such criticism, or even to put our message abroad earlier, in that had it not been for the sort of prudent management of our finances in the past, we wouldn't have been in a position, for example, to put our hand in our pocket and help the leisure centre to open earlier than it might have otherwise done. So I just hope our communication strategy for this, given the circumstances we're in, is in excellent shape. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cheadle. I note your comments, and I fully understand the sentiment there. And I would say what we're doing here is setting an intention at this stage. It's us being honest and forthright at this stage. What happens in the debate surrounding the setting of the final budget will be fully involving of all members, as it always is in the run-up to setting that budget. But I fully appreciate your points, and I think the communication of this is going to be very important.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Danielle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to ask what situation the council is going to be in if if costs continue to rise and income reduces, and how are we actually going to make our budget balance? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Daniel. Again, I think we're getting into detail here, which we don't yet have, and that detail needs to be also viewed against the debate that we will have as members on the priorities that will emerge for us in order to set the budget and continue to offer the services that we want to offer. So I think it's a movable feast in that respect. We've got to be flexible and agile and move with the times. And as I say, make sure that we're in a position where we can set a balanced budget and do the right thing. So I'm afraid I can't answer that right now. That would be prejudging the debate that will, I'm sure, occur. And I hope that everyone here gets the opportunity to have a full part in that debate when we come to set next year's budget. And it will have to be set, I agree, against the backdrop that we operate within. So I fully take your point, but it's too early to say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp, I will ask you back again, please. It's mainly because I just want to point out, please don't, and this is for everyone again, please don't put comments, just general comments in the chat box. It's hard enough keeping up with this as it is. But if you'd like to put your point forward to everyone, please.
Apologies, Mr. Mayor. I was only suggesting that I did say not needing to be called again, but the council tax was the reason I raised Brexit, because we are not just in a time of COVID. So I understand that I am perhaps stepping outside the area of discussion at the moment, but I was flagging an issue that I felt was coming up in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There are no more speakers, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So we go to a vote for this, and I guess this is on block 1 to 5.
If you're happy to, Mr. Mayor, they were proposed and seconded on block 1 to 5.
Yeah.
So if you're happy,
and
take these by.
because I was going to say because of the content, I think we need to go to a full vote on this one, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So members, in alphabetical order on parts 1 to 5, which are across the 2 screens. Councillor Ball.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Bolton. Councillor Bolton.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Bridgewater.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Cheadle.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Crozier.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Daniel.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Davies.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Edmonds.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Ewings.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Hipsey.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Jewry.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Councillor Kemp. Thank you.
4.
Councillor Kimber.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Leach.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Moody.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Mott.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Moyes.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Musgrave.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Ratcliffe.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Renders. Councillor Renders. I'll try it again at the end. Councillor Ridges.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Samuel.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Sellis.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Southcott.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Spetigue.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Vashon.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Yelland.
4.
Thank you. And a final call for Councillor Renders. Doesn't seem to be on the call. Thank you, members. That's therefore 27 and unanimous in favour. Thank you, members.
Thank you. That's carried. Just before I go on, I can understand people's frustrations with this system. But unfortunately, we do have to have a bit of patience. When we click on the button, just wait until it reacts. Councillor Jury, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In respect of recommendation HC 29, I propose the following: that council be recommended to 1. Note the project aims and objectives as detailed in section 3 of the agenda report presented to the Hub Committee meeting. 2. Support the current design direction as set out in section 4 of the agenda report presented to the Hub Committee meeting, recognising the opportunities for external funding. And 3. Note the draft business case as set out at exempt Appendix B of the agenda report presented to the Hub Committee meeting. Could I have a seconder, please?
Jane.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
I'm struggling. I want to unmute if I have to unmute.
I think we'll just wait a second because Councillor Musgrave has a problem by the sound of it.
Apologise. No, I haven't. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, we're in questions on HC 29 and Councillor Moody wishes to ask a question.
Yes, I was just going to say that just to remind councillors that questions can't stray into the exempt items. So if we can keep them to non-exempt items, please. So, Councillor Moody.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I've got some questions on this recommendation and also comments to make in debate, which I fear will stray into part 2. So I'd like to need some guidance on how you want to play this.
So you're going to ask your questions first without mentioning anything it just exempt.
I'm concerned that we may stray into exempt an exempt area based on the questions I have and the debate.
Have you got questions that you can start with, please?
To be perfectly honest, I think that we need to do it under part 2 to be completely safe.
Okay.
Can I suggest, Mr. Mayor, before we do that, Mr. Mayor, can I just check if any members have any part 1 questions rather than sort of bouncing in and out?
First, I agree entirely. So if anybody's got any part 1 questions, if they can type now.
There's nobody typing, Mr. Mayor, so we're in the realms now if members wish to vote to move into part 2.
First of all, I need to ask for. Now we'll if I can have someone to take us into part 2. Someone to propose it, please.
Before you do, Mr. Mayor,
yes, I can see.
Mr. Fairbairn's on.
Yes, please, Mr. Fairbairn.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I, before we go into part 2, I think we do need to know something about what it is we're going into part 2 to discuss, because you do actually have to decide whether it's in the public interest. You have to do that public balance or public interest test balance. So if Councillor Moody could perhaps give an indication of the areas in which he wishes to raise questions.
Okay, the question
members may be in a better position to decide whether we should go into exempt. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I have questions regarding the proposed, particularly part 2 of that recommendation, which is the supporting of the current design direction of the project at Spring Hill, and it's regarding issues regarding the World Heritage Site conservation area and positive buildings within the conservation area and World Heritage Site.
Yes, I actually understand that from previous conversations, but I thought I thought you were going to ask to have one word changed in item 2.
Well,
rather than the other.
Okay, all I can say without saying anything in great detail is that I would be much happier if the word to make a change to the recommendation from support the current design direction to note the current design direction. I don't wish to scupper the officers' work, the hard work that's gone on, but given my feelings within the conservation area, I would not be able to support, but I would be happy to note the current design direction. But as I believe it, the current design direction is a Part 2 item because it involves certain things.
Yes.
That will affect a heritage asset.
Yes. But can we?
So I hope that's I've made that clear.
In the Part 1 bit, are you happy that I ask if that word can be changed?
Well, if I could propose an amendment with the support with the support of the leader, that the word support is changed to note.
Okay, because I was going to suggest if we could get the Part 1 questions.
Yeah. But if we
finish, we could probably do Part 2 in debate.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll take your advice.
Well, I'll take others' advice about changing the word. So,
Mr. Mayor, obviously, Councillor Moody's proposed an amendment. Now, whether that is actually part of the substantive motion at this stage is a matter for the leader and deputy who proposed and seconded it. If they aren't willing to accept that as an amendment, we'll be then looking for a seconder for Councillor Moody's proposition and be debating the amendment. So it's over really to the leader and deputy at this stage. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Leader, comments, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is Mr. Brooke on the call at the moment?
Sorry. Mayor and Leader, I'm here.
Thank you, Mr. Brooke. I just wanted to ask, in your view, do you think the changing of that particular word from support to note would make any difference in our present the present work that we're undertaking to move this project forward?
I don't actually. I believe that there is a process to go through, and heritage is a really key issue, and it will go through following the correct process. It'll be a planning matter ultimately, and I don't think it is too important at this stage.
Thank you, Mr. Brooke. In which case, Mr. Mayor, I would be content to amend the recommendation to change the word support to change the word note. And I take it from previous discussions that I've had with the team that the World Heritage Site and the conservation area issues are very important and are being looked at as part of the whole project.
Thank you.
So that in mind, Mr. Mayor, if Councillor Samuel as seconder is happy to accept that, we will then replace that word in the substantive motion. Thank you.
I'm happy to second that.
Fine. Thank you very much.
Therefore, Mr. Mayor, on the screen, you'll note we have, pardon the pun, we have changed recommendation 2 to a new substantive motion. Thank you.
I'll note the note. Yes, thank you. Councillor Moody, are you okay with that?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Leader. I just think it's important at this point that we note what's going on. I totally support the project and wouldn't want to delay any work. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Any more questions? No. We go into debate. Just as a reminder, if anybody wants to stray into Part 2, any debate at all?
There is no typing I can see, Mr. Mayor, at this stage.
Fine. Thank you very much. We go to a vote. Are we happy to do this one by exception, or maybe one of the councillors would like to advise that we go to a full vote on this one?
Can I suggest, Mr. Mayor, now we've got 3 parts which are in essence noting that we take this by exception, if that's the wish of you in the meeting?
That's That's fine. Anybody against that? Please type.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the record, I can't see any members
No.
typing, so we can assume that's unanimously carried. Parts 1 to 3 of the recommendation as revised. Thanks, members.
Thank you. Is there anything you want to add, Councillor Jury?
Not to that point, no, thank you.
Okay. I think
We are now on to, sorry, Mr. Mayor, if I can help, we're now on to HC40 recommendation, which is about the broadband community support.
Yes, it's just, sorry, it's not on my list. That's why I was hesitating. So yes,
Okay.
Councillor Jury, please.
I will press on. In respect of recommendation HC40, I propose the following. That council be recommended to approve the creation of a broadband community support earmarked reserve of £100,000 to be financed by transferring £50,000 from the existing business rates retention earmarked reserve and £50,000 from the business rates discretionary fund additional restrictions grants scheme. Could I have a seconder, please?
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any questions?
There are no questions, Mr. Mayor, coming through.
Thank you. Any debate?
There is no indication of any members wishing to debate either, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. As this is financial, should we take this as a full vote?
Ultimately, it's your call, Mr. Mayor. If that's your wish, we'll do a full vote.
I think we should.
Thank you,
Please.
members. So on recommendation HC40 as per the screen, members, Councillor Ball.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Bolton. Councillor Bolton. I'll try again at the end. Councillor Bridgewater.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Cheadle.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Crozier.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Daniel.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Davies.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Edmonds.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Ewings.
4. Oh, sorry, 4.
Thank you, Councillor Hipsey.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Jury.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Kimber.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Leach.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Moody.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Mott. Councillor Mott.
Apologies, 4.
Thank you, Councillor Moyes.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Musgrave.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Ratcliffe.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Renders.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Ridges.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Samuel.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Sellis.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Southcott.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Spettigue.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Vachon.
4.
Thank you, and Councillor Yelland.
4.
Thank you, and we'll just try again, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Bolton doesn't appear to be on the call. So therefore, members, that's 27 in favour and that's unanimously carried. Thank you, members.
Thank you. And again, Councillor Jury.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In respect of recommendation HC41, I propose the following. That council be recommended to endorse for immediate adoption the World Heritage Site Management Plan 2020 to 2025. If I could have a seconder, please.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any questions?
Councillor Ewings has a hand up, Mr. Mayor.
We have asked not to put hands up.
Sorry,
Can we
Mr.
please
Mayor.
have a comment, please?
Sorry, I wouldn't have been quick enough typing. May I just ask that this site management plan, will that be taken into account for all planning applications that come forward within this mining heritage area, please?
Who would like to answer?
I'm happy to answer that one, Councillor Jury, if that's okay. Yes, it will, Councillor Ewings, as with all of the documents, along with the JLP, etc., it will be taken into account and has been previously.
Okay. Councillor Ewings.
Oh, thank you very much, Councillor Mott.
Thank you. Councillor Sellis, please.
Many thanks, Mr. Mayor. This is a comment as I'm on the World Heritage Partnership with Devon County Council representing. I appreciate the emphasis on the climate change. It's in significant detail, and really following on from what Councillor Ewings was just saying, I've also asked that in our planning documents that we should be looking at the biodiversity more closely, because when plans are put into our department as the planning authority, there's landscaping, but all too often it's landscaped with plants which really aren't the best for supporting biodiversity. And I think that as the main planning authority in this area, we should be focusing more on this. That was just a comment which I feel I would like noted, please, actually, officers, that we do need to take more emphasis, pay more attention to the actual types of plants which are used in landscaping. Thank you.
Thank you. We slipped into debate there.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
That's okay. That's okay. Were there any other questions? If there's nobody else was typing, any other debate? No.
There is no one typing, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. So we go to a vote. Can we do this by exception?
If it's your wish, Mr. Mayor, if we take away exception and invite any members who aren't willing to accept the recommendation, which is on the screen for HC 41, just indicate so in the chat box, please, members. Just giving it a couple of seconds, Mr. Mayor, but I don't see anybody typing. So again, I think we can take that as a unanimous approval. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, Councillor Jury.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We now go to E, Invest to Earn Committee meeting, 2nd of October 2020. Councillor Edmonds, can you present, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the minutes of the meeting of the Invest to Earn Committee held on the 2nd of October 2020 be received and noted. They are IE 1 to 720 and can be found between pages 1 and 2 of the separate circulation. Do I have a seconder, please?
Happy to second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
Councillor Daniels on the
Councillor. Yes, I was expecting Councillor Daniels.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Mayor. Having looked at the minutes, I saw that there has been a decision made not to invest in the solar scheme, and I'd like to know more details about the reasoning behind that decision, and also could the ONS committee have a written or verbal update to review this decision? And my other question is, what plans does the Invest to Earn committee have to include explicit consideration of climate impacts on any investment decisions, and also looking at prior investments? Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to answer that?
Mr. Mayor, shall I
yes, please.
answer that, please? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. But before I do, I'm mindful that the investor-owned meeting on the 2nd of October was held in part 2, or the vast majority. So I just need to be guarded in my response to Councillor Daniel, and maybe before I do, I should take guidance on how far I should go in terms of providing an explanation. And if it's a full explanation, then I think possibly we need to consider moving into part 2.
Mr. Fairbairn, please.
Apologies, Mr. Mayor, I missed that. Could Councillor repeat it again, please?
Yes, certainly. The investor-owned meeting on the 2nd of October, when this the solar farm was discussed, it was a verbal update, but the meeting at that point was in part 2. So I just need guidance as to how far I should go in terms of providing an explanation to Councillor Daniel.
Good, thanks.
That's a good question. I don't know whether or not the circumstances have moved on since the verbal update was given, and therefore the reasons why it was exempt still exist. I don't know if Mr. Brooke is still in the meeting, whether in fact he is able to indicate whether or not the circumstances have moved on. If the circumstances are the same, then I think the update would need to remain or would need to go into exempt business because it obviously relates to the financial and business affairs of the council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Does that help, Councillor?
Mr. Mayor, I am on the call, and I'm perhaps slightly guessing, but I suspect it would be prudent to move into part 2 if that's helpful.
Okay, thank you. Mr. White.
Mr. Mayor, we're therefore looking for a proposal to be seconded and a vote to go into part 2. And assuming the majority of members are willing to go into part 2, we'll just need to hold off momentarily while the live streaming is cut.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So can I have a proposal to go into part 2?
Happy to propose, Mr. Mayor.
And a seconder, please.
Happy to propose, Mr. Mayor, or second, Mr. Mayor.
So all in favour, if we do it by exemption, if you've got anyone has a problem about going into part 2, please state it.
Just checking the chat box, Mr. Mayor. Nobody seems to be voting against going into part 2.
If we can have live stream put back up, please.
Mr. Mayor, I'm just waiting for it to connect. And we are live again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And for anybody watching, thank you for your indulgence there. Can I, that was questions. If there's any other questions, please type. If not, we'll move it to debate.
There's no one typing chair, so that we can assume those committee minutes are noted. Thank you,
Yes,
Mr. Mayor.
thank you. Right, item 6, COVID-19 recovery and renewal plan. Councillor Jury, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members, in front of you is a paper detailing the Council's response to the coronavirus epidemic and the various ways in which that situation has changed the way we work and interact with our residents. As the report says, the long-term effects of the virus are many and varied, including tragic loss of life and debilitating illness, disruption to education, and an economic shock, which is now starting to have severe effects. The Council continues to play a key role alongside our partners in the response and recovery. I'm very proud of all that we have achieved so far in supporting our communities, both individuals and businesses. The report sets out the details of the discussions that members have had in a number of key areas and identifies the way forward as part of the planning process. If the plan is adopted, the next steps will be to bring the proposals about and that may include inclusion in future revised corporate plan, setting out the council's aspirations and targets to 2023 and beyond. I hope that all councillors will agree that this is an impressive and is an impressive piece of work, and will be able to approve the plan when asked to do so. Are there any questions, members, on the draft recovery plan?
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Mott has wished to ask a question. And you're on mute, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Mott, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On page 11 of the supplementary papers, section 1.3, part A, speaks of food and drink producers to diversify and access new markets. I'm concerned that we are being seen to encourage agriculture and farmers to diversify into markets without supporting them in their agricultural means of earning an income. So I would just really like assurances that we are still going to support agriculture and farming without encouraging them to diversify too far from their initial mode of work.
Councillor Jury.
Thank you, Councillor. My belief is that agriculture and farming is vitally important to this area. It's really important, apart from anything else, for maintaining the countryside as it is, and it's a really important part of our history and culture. It's also important for agricultural businesses to diversify and bring in different streams of income. So I think it's a question of getting the balance right, but I agree with you. We certainly don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, as it were. And we certainly want to continue to support this area as being one that is steeped in its history of food production. Interestingly, there are a number of schemes that are running at the moment from BAYS through the LEP, which are aimed at helping agri-producers to diversify in different ways. And those are being supported by a number of partners within the region. But I agree with you. It's important that we don't forget our principles here and do continue to support agriculture.
Any other questions? No.
There are no other questions, Mr. Mayor.
We go into debate. Any debate, councillors?
Councillor Ridges, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Ridges.
Yes, just I fully endorse this plan. One point that I would be very keen on is that, having seen it in the business park where my company is based in Exeter, we've seen lots of companies downsizing, and they're downsizing a lot of the time to Regis offices. What they're looking for is less office space, but because more and more people will be working from home, and this is a huge culture shock to go through businesses, and I think it would last. So making something, these work hubs, smaller office units with access to boardrooms now and again, seems to be the way forward. And 2 or 3 neighbouring businesses have done that and moved across the road to the Regis offices by the Met Office. So fully endorse it and add that as a comment to the plan as well.
Thank you, Councillor Ridges. I think that's a really interesting way that people are finding to work, that whilst permanent offices, businesses may be moving away from those, I think that certainly small businesses still relish that human contact and interaction and networking that they can gain from the type of office space that you're talking about. And it would certainly form part of our plans and something that we would support moving on from here.
Councillor Vachon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, indeed, this is an impressive document. I'm very impressed with it. I was especially pleased to see that scope has been included for supporting tourism, particularly new companies, etc. Especially with the news we had in the last few days regarding the railway passenger service coming back into Oakhampton in the near future. And I think this is obviously going to need an awful lot of infrastructure as well as promotion for the area. And it will be a benefit not only obviously to Oakhampton, but West Devon and the surrounding hinterland of if we promote it as a sort of a hub. I think tourism is obviously the big key to getting people back into the area and getting our businesses going again and bringing back the prosperity to the town. So I was very pleased with this document. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vachon. I echo everything you say.
Any further debate?
Councillor Ball, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just following on from Councillor Vachon's points, obviously I'm going to fully subscribe to them. I think it's been said quite a few times, and probably all members have heard one of us say it at some point, that you know, economic regeneration always follows the introduction of a new railway. You can look back at many examples of that, and if you look back at the Borders Railway, which was obviously a new railway, what happened is a lot of new businesses actually were created alongside the line. They became sort of, you couldn't have anticipated it. It was something that happened due to circumstance. So I think it's worth, you know, sort of remembering that and just having that as sort of flesh on the bones of the plan to keep an eye on, and certainly promotion, as Councillor Vachon said, is a key part of that. But I think it's also about recognising that new opportunities might come up, and that we might need to you know, draw alongside and bring support and encouragement to. So just to add a little bit more to what Councillor Vachon's very good points. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Yellen.
Yes, so I did want to speak about the railway as well. I just couldn't work out how to leave a comment in the chat box. Yes, I agree with what everybody has said before. I just wanted to really comment on 1.10, which is talking about engaging with other partners, and I wondered if there's any scope to include Great Western or Network Rail in that. Because as this announcement has come forward, but we also need to be looking at the whole reinstatement of the Northern Route. Now I realise we're not going to get that done in the next 10 minutes, but it is still something that I think we need to keep as a matter of importance for the area and the wider area. So I think it would be helpful, perhaps, if when we're looking at regeneration and commercial, that we could incorporate them as stakeholders as well. Thank you.
Councillor Jury.
Thank you, councillors. I think those are all really good comments. I really applaud everyone who's had a hand in getting the railway, the commitment for the railway to come back to Oakhampton, and it will be a massive thing for Oakhampton and for West Devon, and it's really important that we follow up with all of these things that you're talking about in terms of tourism. We do have a visitor economy, and I think we need to make more of that. And working alongside all of our various partners right across the piece is the way to move things forward and get the benefits and leverage more opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is an excellent document. There's a huge amount of work that's gone into this, and I think we should thank officers for what they've put together. With regard to the reinstatement of the railway from Oakhampton to Exeter, I think the people that have been involved in that need a lot of thanks as well. And I just wonder if, when we're in discussions with Devon County, whether they would be prepared to put some money forward to place some advertising at the major cities' railway stations, like we used to have. It used to be, you know, billboards put up advertising at Devon, and I suppose we need to include Cornwall. But certainly with people coming down to the West Country, which was very, very important. And I think we should go back to that way of advertising. But I know that Devon County, cut the budget and that was done away with. But I think it's something we need to encourage them to reinstate. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I guess it'd be some form of app today. Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to help the leader, because he may not be aware of this, that work is already started to be prepared from GWR's side. So I think it will be useful for West Devon as obviously as an authority to have an input into that. I'll ensure that Councillor Jury has got the correct contact at GWR for that.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. Interestingly, one of the officers at GWR contacted me last week just to reiterate about the line coming back to Oakhampton, and I've taken the opportunity to set up a meeting with some of the bigwigs there, and that is being talked about at the moment, and diaries are being put together. So we're definitely looking at what we can do in terms of talking to GWR. But thank you for the thought.
Thank you. Any other debate? No. Are we happy to take this?
I think I'm not sure I've actually moved the recommendation yet, Mr. Mayor. So
beg your pardon.
I think I probably should do that. So
yes, I think that might be a good idea. Thank you.
If I can move the recommendation, which is as shown on your screens and as shown on page 7 of the supplementary paper. If I could have a seconder, please.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So can we take this by exception? We're happy to do that. So if anybody has any concerns, please just type.
Just give it a couple of seconds, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
But nobody appears to be typing, so I think, again, we can assume that's unanimously carried. Thank you, members.
Thank you very much indeed. Item 7, climate change and biodiversity strategy and action plan. That's Councillors Jury and Davies, please.
Okay, I'm just going to kick off very briefly, Mr. Mayor, if I may. Just to say, as we are all aware, the Council declared a climate change emergency in May 2019. As a result, a working group was established and Adam Williams was appointed to his current role. The working group has met under the chairmanship of Councillor Davies, and the report that is in front of you summarises the strategy for adoption and proposes a series of other actions. I'd like to hand over to Councillor Davies to introduce the report and take questions. Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the Leader pointed out, at our annual meeting in May 2019, we recognised that there was a need to declare a climate change emergency. And I think at this stage, it's well worth pointing out that we also added biodiversity. There's a biodiversity emergency, and we are actually one of the only few councils to actually add biodiversity to our climate change emergency, and that's probably quite key to know that, because we do mention that quite a lot, biodiversity a lot in our workings and our discussions. On the 23rd of July, we resolved as a council to sign the Devon Climate Emergency Declaration and get fully involved in what's going on with Devon, which we have done as a council. Last December, on the 17th of December, we considered a comprehensive report and action plan, which was drawn up after considerable input from officers looking at their own departments, seeing where they could actually make changes to help reduce our carbon footprint. But as the Leader said from that meeting, it was put back to the working group that we should develop actual a climate change and biodiversity strategy, which is before you now. This should have come to our September meeting, but as we all know, was deferred to this meeting. The strategy starts off with the warming stripes devised by Ed Hawkins at the National Centre for Atmospheric Science, which are basically the warming stripes, which are data visualization graphics, which were backed up yesterday, I see, by the Met Office, which was heavily publicised in the media. In the contents, there are basically three main parts, which I think are all fairly self-explanatory, and they will run through fairly well. Mr. Mayor, I would like to thank the officers and the members involved in the working group, because we have met many times and discussed many things to put the various things together. As a council, we have already committed to three main things, and this is quite key, that we reduce our own organisational carbon emissions to net zero by 2030. And secondly, that we as a council commit to working with partners throughout the Devon Climate Emergency Response Group to reduce the Borough of West Devon's carbon emissions to net zero by 2050. So that's us working with other organisations and people within the borough to reduce the overall footprint within the borough. And on top of that, the third point was that the council aimed for a 10% biodiversity net gain in the habitat value of its green and wooded public open space by 2025. So we've got three key commitments there, and hopefully this strategy works towards that. I'm happy to take any questions, Mr. Mayor. There are 5 recommendations which I'm happy to move when you wish me to move them. I may not be able to answer all the questions, but hopefully if I can't, either Drew Powell or Adam Williams will. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ewings.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Davies for his presentation. I was going to ask about the funding for some of the projects that you have, and that was my sort of question number 1. And question number 2 was, do we have a specialist officer re the cycle routes? And due to the maybe lack of funding for the climate change work, what would Adam, and sorry, I can't remember his surname, I think it was Williams, wasn't it? Would he become that specialist of cycle routes? Sorry, it's a bit mucky, but yes, those are my questions, please.
Who would like to answer them?
Well, I think on the costings, I mean, Mr. Mayor, on the costing side of it, this is a working document, so some of the costings we've got to work out as we go along. But it was interesting when we met last December, we were explaining that one of the things we would like to try and do is encourage more staff and maybe councillors to engage more on sort of internet meetings, and of course that's been forced upon us anyway, so we actually have saved some money there. But it might be an idea, Mr. Mayor, if I hand over to Adam Williams or to Drew Powell to answer those questions.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, would you like me to pick those questions up?
Yes, please.
The third one around about the specialist role with regard to cycle paths. I mean, it's something that we would pick up. Adam obviously has a planning background, and we have other officers within the council who have some understanding of that. It's probably part of the our approach to place, and I know that Chris Brooke has had some discussions with partners around cycle routes. So I think if we needed to go down the route of getting specialist officers in, we would either look at recruiting or bringing or buying some advice in. But I think we have the necessary skills within the organisation at the moment to pursue the plans within the strategy. The other part was around the finance, which I believe Councillor Davies has picked up. Can you remind me of the third part, please, Councillor Ewings?
Sorry, it was about if Mr. Williams is, due to some of the funding issues and things like that, what would happen if his role wasn't able to be full-time? Would he then, or could he, what role would it be if the money is really that tight, as it may well be? I know when we took on and agreed to make the decision to employ him, it was about him earning his income via grants and bringing in grants to the authority, and that's where I'm going with this. Thank you, Drew.
Okay, I think at the moment you know, Adam's post is fully funded. I think in terms of now that we, you know, hopefully today the strategy will be adopted, it will allow us to start to pursue some of those funding opportunities. As you know, we've already received in excess of £200,000 to support some work in the private existing housing stock on energy efficiency, and we'll continue to look for those funding opportunities, both to deliver capital improvements, but also to fund the expertise and the capacity of the organisation to you know, progress elements of the strategy. I think that the key is that at this stage the strategy is very much, it identifies areas we need to investigate, and we'll need to provide. We'll explore those issues further, and then we will at some point need to come back to members if there is going to be a financial requirement to deliver against one of those actions. But at this stage, you know, there are many and varied, and we will continue to, as I say, to explore those and come back to members if we need some finance. But Adam's post is in place, and we've got the necessary expertise to progress the work as it stands.
Okay, Councillor.
May I just pursue the bit about with these cycle routes, because that's even mentioned in the appendices in the report itself on page 61 under 2.2. You know, we really need to be pushing on this. You know, I've been pushing on the A386 now for 2 years and trying to work with officers on that, landowners, etc. We've got Councillor Daniel and Councillor Hayworth who are working on the Chagford line that comes round from Teenbridge, etc., so that we can have the whole of our borough that is on a proper cycle route. And, you know, I just think that is really important, and it is something that is actually deliverable. You know, but we just need to keep fighting and applying for grants or using Section 106 where appropriate. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just add to that. Yeah, obviously this is a strategy, and sort of cycling and cycle routes would all be part of that. But I think, as Mr. Powell has pointed out already, it's a case of once we can get this agreed and start working on it, then we can start looking for grants and support from other people as well. I mean, one of the things is, as Mr. Powell said, we've already brought in the £224,500, which is quite an achievement actually for the Green Home Grant. And one of the things I've said for myself and also for members of the working group, we're quite happy to join any other or be part of any other group within the borough, or speak at any parish council meetings just to say what we're up to. But it amazes me how many people have come back to me and said actually they're not on main supply for gas or for electric and that sort of thing. So the more money we can get in for sort of green homes grants, the better, really.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sellis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. My question is, when you were formulating the climate change and biodiversity strategy, did you look at the Devon County Council website relate to grass cutting, weed control policies, and plus the management of the verges for the benefit of wildlife? You mentioned that no other council has highlighted biodiversity. I suggest that actually in the most comprehensive information on Devon County Council's website, there's information about the road verges and, you know, and what vital refuges they are for wildlife and plants, birds, mammals, insects, and there's very sensitive management is required. So I think that members need to take some solace in the fact that Devon County Council has actively supported all our birds, bees, insects, etc. For many years now, certainly since 2009 when I was elected. We're encouraging communities to work together, and I just want to know whether you referenced the Devon County policies, please.
Mr. Mayor, if I answer that one, Mr. Powell can back me up if he needs to add anything else. But yes, we did look at that, and we are looking very closely at everything that's coming out of the County Council. And Drew Powell has been working closely with the County Council. And of course, within the working group, we got Councillor Daniel, who is a champion in that area anyway, and is pushing very much for the biodiversity. But we definitely did look at the, and I'll continue to look at whatever's coming out of county.
Thank you very much, because that is reassuring, because of course we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We just want to make it stronger. And also, if I may ask, with the cycle paths and everything, we've got to consider, I think at the time is, I'm sorry, it'll be for debate, Mr. Mayor, sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Moss, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of points, if I may. On page 60 at the top of the document, item B, it says where we are going to investigate the issues in capacity for hydropower in West Devon, discuss main issues with the Environment Agency and Dartmoor National Park Authority. Should we include reference to South West Water in that? I know when I had a meeting with them, gosh, it seems ages ago now, but it probably wasn't that long ago. I know they were very keen to work with us as a local authority with all aspects of renewable, including solar power. So I was just wondering if we could include reference to South West Water under that point. However, my main point is, please, on page 70 under objective 4. As a farmer and a local producer, I do have concerns over the wording of the second bullet point at the top of page 70, in particular where it states, consider reducing their meat consumption. I would like to please suggest a different wording for that, if I may. Are you happy for me to suggest that wording now, Mr.
Carry
Mayor?
on, yes.
Or would you like to, would you like a response first, please, from the officers?
Okay.
Well, Mr. Mayor, if I just respond to the South West Water part, when I think Councillor Mott may have been part of our discussions when we had that, when we were discussing that, and actually I think we did actually have a lengthy discussion about whether we should include South West Water or not, and there's no reason why we shouldn't, because obviously they are quite a key player. And likewise on the meat section, that was quite a lengthy debate on that as well, actually. But I'm happy to take any suggested rewording on that.
If I may then, Councillor Davies and Mr. Mayor, can I please suggest that the wording is changed to encourage individuals to look at the impact of their diet and support the increase in the consumption of in-season locally grown food across Devon. I'm just concerned that, again, we are kind of targeting farming, and while I'm not condoning irresponsible meat consumption, I do feel sometimes that the headlines, if you like, don't necessarily look at local production, or indeed the way that we as British farmers produce our meat and our produce, whereas they take the global production into greater account. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to accept that, but I just wondered if Drew Powell had any comments.
Mr. Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, happy to take that as amendment. I think, all of these actions are there to be developed, and that would be fine with me, certainly. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. White, should we do anything extra to that? Are we happy that?
At this moment, we're in questions, so we haven't got a proposition on the table, Mr. Mayor. So there are options in that if Councillor Davies wants to propose it at the appropriate time with a subject to. I would suggest that would be the appropriate time to do so.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Councillor Cheadle. Councillor Cheadle. No. Councillor Daniel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is that there are obvious overlaps with the West Devon's climate and biodiversity strategy and the COVID recovery plan. So my question is, how are we actually going to practically get these far-reaching visions into action? And has consideration been given to setting up working groups and forums to allow our plans, application for grants and working with partners to flourish? Thank you.
Councillor Davies.
Would you like me to answer that, Mr. Mayor?
I was about to say number 4 probably answers that one on the recommendations, but over to the leader.
I think in my view, these are this item and the last item are really important for shaping our future vision. And I really see these things coming together in a reshaped sort of post-recovery corporate plan, if you like, which really brings forward members' aspirations and vision for the future, but brings all of these things into account in pulling that strategy together, pulling objectives together, and setting out targets that we can achieve over the next 3 to 5 years. That's where I see this taking place. I personally think it's much better to be looking at it as an overall document that will bring some of these items in. We can choose then which areas of policy are important for us to move forward, because there will have to be choices that will be made. It will make sure that the resources get put in the right place and there'll be no dilution of effort. So when we're talking about cycle paths are important, it's really important that those are seen in the context of both the shaping of place that we do, but also in our offer as a destination for the tourist industry. So all of these things, I think, will come together in our revised corporate plan, which we're working on at the moment, and will be informed by the documents that are in front of us. So I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kimber.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm just looking on page 55 under cars and transport. This is a question, really. It says higher parking charges for polluting vehicles. And I'm just a bit worried that people with polluting vehicles are probably people with less money, and then they're going to have to pay higher charges for parking. And I just wondered quite how that goes together. Thank you.
Councillor Davies.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, this is another one when we met as a group. Was quite a discussion around this, and I think it was a case of we'd just be looking into this to sort of see what we could do and whether it was. I mean, it's in a way actually how you actually bring this into working into the car parks to actually work out who would pay more than not practically possible through our payment machines anyway. But I think this was just a case we'd be looking at this. But of course, as we know, as the government have already announced that they're phasing out petrol cars anyway. So in the next sort of 10 years. So this is something that's happening nationally as well as locally. But this is something really we were just going to look at and maybe consider, not necessarily say something we would actually do.
Thank you. It's an interesting one. If 10 years' time, whether those on low incomes can afford other alternative transport, would be interesting to find out. Councillor Cheadle, I'm glad you're back.
I'm glad I'm back. Yes, I've got a question, which is sort of half a question, half a comment, but I'll reserve the comment bit till later. Looking at the implications at the end of the paper in front of us, the financial implications column says, yes, there are financial implications. Some actions commit to financing some measures through developer contributions. That's all it says as the financial implications of this paper. And my question really is whether that's appropriate or sufficient, given that other councils, notably South Hams, have actually committed some working capital to kickstart their equivalent of our climate change paper. And has any thought been given to whether we should follow a similar path and have some, as I say, some working capital to get a foot underneath this and get something actually happening? That's my first question. The second is that it says it's an action plan, but it doesn't really go into describing how the action is going to be delivered. Is there any advice on how these actions are actually going to be undertaken?
Councillor Davies.
Mr. Mayor, do you mind if I pass over to Drew Powell on that one, because he has been involved in quite a few other councils as well, so he'd probably be able to explain certainly what's going on with South Hams and other councils.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for the question, Councillor Cheadle. I mean, the two parts. I think in terms of costing, the report doesn't commit to expenditure at this stage. The actions in the future, in some situations, will look for some expenditure, and obviously we'd have to come back to members to secure funding for some of those actions. We will continue to look for external funding. I think that will be the main way that we will progress work within the strategy. So it is difficult to put figures and pounds and pence to most of these actions at this stage, and I accept that. It is a strategy and it's an overarching set of actions which we'll explore. I think in terms of how do we turn those actions into delivery, we will need to pull together operational delivery plans. If you look at the strategy, most of those actions are actually projects in themselves. Best way to describe it is probably to look at the operational carbon reduction plan. So aim 1, which is about reducing our own carbon footprint to net zero by 2030. That's more straightforward. We understand our carbon footprint. We've measured it. We know what it is, and we know what we need to do. We need to reduce energy usage within the buildings, and that in itself will be a piece of work we'll look at, and that will then we'll better come back and say, okay, to get to net zero for accommodation for the buildings will require us to do X, Y, and Z. It may require changing to heating, PV, whatever it is, and that will have a cost attached to it. Now, whether or not we've got funding built into the repairs and maintenance contract and plans for the buildings that we could use to offset those costs would be part of that piece of work. And secondly, it may be that actually we cannot get to net zero on the buildings and we might have to offset some of that carbon. So for those, I think we can bring forward quite clear projects at this stage. For the second part, aim 2, which is to bring the borough to net zero in 2050, clearly our level of influence and control over that is much less. At this stage, we know roughly the carbon emissions for the borough. The majority of those come from, for example, industry and from infrastructure and transport. Our influence is minimal. Where we can do work, for example, on existing housing stock, that's where we're progressing matters, securing funding, and there we can actually have an operational delivery plan that shows what we're trying to achieve and what we have achieved against a reference point in time. And the strategy does give us a set of broad PIs as a starting point in the first part. So totally understand the challenge around making sure we've got deliverables from this strategy, and we will be developing those around each of the actions over time, and we've given a broad indication of when we'll develop each of those areas in the strategy. So hopefully, Councillor Cheadle, that gives you a little bit of assurance that there is a plan to deliver this, not just purely to pull together a strategy.
Could I just come back?
Yep.
I specifically asked whether any thought had been given to creating some sort of funding, as has happened in South Hams. Was that discussed and rejected?
Well, if I can, Mr. Mayor, I mean, at this stage we haven't put forward any bids for some funding, and we'll be coming back to members on a case-by-case basis as we develop the actions within the strategy.
Okay, and just one on the sort of the action plan. You often referred to "we will do this, we will do that." Is the "we" members of the Climate Change Working Group or others?
The majority of the work, I think, will be carried out by the officers once the strategy has been adopted, and the working group obviously will be there to support policy development and to support, for example, the community forum, which is proposed within the paper. So, I think it'll be a combination of members working on policy and officers actually delivering and bringing forward the options.
Okay, thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? And thank you, Councillor Kemp. I understand you have to leave. No
There
more
are no
questions.
further questions, Mr. Mayor.
If we can move into debate. Any debates?
Sorry, before we do, Mr. Mayor, can we have a proposal which is seconded?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, so I was about to say that.
I'll
Yes,
go
so,
backwards then.
so, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to move the recommendations as listed, 1 to 5 on the agenda, with the amendment to recommendation number 1, which is on your screens at the moment, which is basically subject to point 1 on page 70 of the presentation agenda reported being amended to read: encourage individuals to look at the impact of their diet and support the increase in the consumption of in-season of locally grown food across Devon. So with that amendment, I'm happy to move all 5 together, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So, debates.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, we're waiting for a seconder.
Sorry, did we get a second?
I'm happy to second that, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Councillor Hipsey.
And Councillor Hipsey for debate, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry. I put comment rather than debate, so I was actually before Councillor Hipsey. Thank you.
I give way to Councillor Sullis with.
Thanks.
No
Sorry, no, I just didn't
thank
want.
you.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Yeah, actually, when we get used to putting our hands up, it does work out quite nicely. Thanks.
Sorry, that is if the chair can see the hands, which I
Oh, yeah. Well, we
carry on.
Teams is great when you get used to it. It's good. Thank you very much. Yeah, I welcome this, and I think it's an excellent opportunity to take the positives out of what's happened with the COVID situation, as Councillor Daniels was saying, and how we link this into our biodiversity climate change strategy. I think it is key, and also really the country and our councils were all in a perilous financial position. However, we do have an opportunity to seek community payback, of which there are millions of hours owing. We could help, I suggest, with the maintenance and creation of cycle paths, using that and hopefully get more bang for our bucks. So, you know, we were talking about the financing of this, and I think we should look into that. And the government is seeking to establish more apprenticeship schemes and establish, and I think that if we work and are really creative, hopefully we should be able to get some excellent jobs for the younger people locally. So that's great. And I fully support the comments made by Councillor Kimber about the petrol, what you said about that, and also Councillor Mott, how you restructured the recommendation. Thank you very much for doing that, because I couldn't have supported that. I felt actually reading the information, the report, it was very sinister. And I didn't like that, so the nuance of meat eaters and car users. And it's very rare that I sense things which are sinister in notes. So I'm glad that was changed. So I just hope that we will be able to embrace this and work really well for our community. We have to, for our future, our children's children. So thank you very much for all the people that have put all the hours of work into it.
Thank you. Councillor Hipsey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to also echo and make thanks to everybody who's been involved in this. It's an excellent report, and it deals with some pretty punchy subjects too. But I'd like to draw members' attention, if I may, to the table on page 16, which is entitled "What We Propose to Do," which at the end of the day is the most important thing of all. Item 2.2 there talks about housing developments. Well, I'll read it. Ensure new housing developments are much more cycling and walking friendly. The activity talks about, in the activity column, talks about cycle routes. I think we ignore pedestrian access to our developments and our peril, though. There are plenty of examples. I'm thinking particularly of the Emden Grange development close to where I live, where the pedestrian access is absolutely appalling. And I know that that was not the fault of our council, but I think it's really important that we consider pedestrian access and to these developments as well as cycling. That to me is probably one of the most important parts of this report. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It really is a very good report for strategy and action plan. One thing I would urge is that we do have a good working relationship with South West Water, because their expertise in hydroelectric, as seen at Mary Tavy and Morwell Ham, will stand us in good stead as we move forward if we're looking at introducing hydroelectric on any of the rivers coming off the Dartmoor, because of the volume of rainfall we get. It's a very cheap resource once the hydroelectric station is built. The one at Mary Tavy has been running since 1936, and when it's running at peak times, it provides power for 5,000 homes. The issue of older polluting cars, I think that will sort itself out. And one must have to bear in mind that they pay a higher road tax than the newer cars, electric, or the the newer cars that are coming forward, the hybrid ones. So it's something that I think will sort itself out as we go along. I do find it a little insulting to officers that both the issues with the polluting cars and the issue about the meat consumption, which I totally support what Councillor Mott has said, but I cannot believe that they can be being seen as sinister. I think that was rather out of order. But anyway, it's a start. We're making good progress on this, and I think it's something that we need to keep moving forward quite strongly with as time goes by. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Yelland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was actually just a question for clarity. I just rereading the amendment where it talks about under 1, where it talks about locally grown food across Devon, and I wasn't sure if it was supposed to be locally produced food. I wasn't sure if it was just how it was written. I wasn't sure if it was supposed to be produced, which is a bit more all-encompassing.
Who'd like to answer that one?
No, I think it's really a matter for either Councillor Mott or Councillor Davies or Councillor Hipsey, propose a seconder, or the member who brought that one forward to start with.
Councillor Davies, let's try with you first.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I'd be happy. Yes, I can understand that. I'd be happy with produced to replace grown, but it's up to Councillor Mott, really, as she brought that through as an amendment.
I'm happy also, Mr. Mayor, for it to be produced if that provides greater clarity for members.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Yelland?
Yes.
Fine, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Daniel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is just a comment. As you probably all know, I'm a really strong advocate of West Devon's biodiversity plan to increase this by 10%. And I think we can achieve this and even more. And it's a relatively inexpensive thing to do. It's one of my passions to see our verges and hedges allowed to grow and thrive. And I recently sent all the councillors a link to a new road development in the southeast, where all the banks and verges have been seeded with wildflowers, and they now have half the English population of butterflies. So I think that just shows what you can achieve if you wish. And the verges and hedges are cut in splays where necessary for the vision of drivers, but really I think they're very important areas of biodiversity, and that's something that I would like to see us adopt in all our land management. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more debate?
Councillor Vachon's next, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Vachon, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, this is a subject, environmental technology, that I did as part of a degree module many years ago, and the same things are happening now. This is a very good document, and I can understand how difficult it is to produce this, because any proposal in one area has maybe severe consequences in a totally different area. And I'll go back to the gas guzzling cars. One of the things we came across was a report many years ago about obviously the carbon footprint of certain vehicles. And the carbon footprint includes that, obviously, the mining of the ore, producing the steel, etc., right through to disposing of all those elements after the car has ended its life. And it was found that, in fact, the most environmentally friendly car at that time was a 4-litre American gas guzzler, because it had very simple technology. And even throughout its life, obviously it was producing carbon dioxide by being used, but even taking into that consideration, it was easy to dispose of and recyclable. Whereas modern vehicles now are so exotic, some of the materials they use are extremely exotic and very difficult to recycle and dispose of. So I can understand the consternation and the difficulty that this report has come to, and I can understand that it will be even more difficult to come to more precise proposals at a later date, because they really have to take consequences far down the line from what is first thought of. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Cheadle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My comment is that the document in front of us, which is very well put together, I have to say, very readable and likeable, could, in one sense, be a bit of a deception, in that we could turn around in 4 years' time and find we'd delivered very little. For my money, it would be better for us as a council to select some specific things that we would wish to achieve, which we believed we could achieve as a council, and put a huge amount of effort behind those. I draw as a parallel, we decided 6 months ago or so to do something about the appalling broadband in the area. And actually, because we've concentrated on it, we've actually achieved quite a lot. There's a long way to go, but we're actually getting there. We could, if we chose to, pick 2 or 3 things from this plan and really go hell for leather to deliver them. We could, for example, pick cycle tracks, if that's what the council believed was an important part of our climate change agenda. But if we keep it as it is at the moment, without sort of selecting a couple of specific objectives, I think we might, in a sense, dilute our energy and not manage to push much across the line. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can I respond to that?
Yes, certainly.
Very quickly. Yes, of course. I mean, that's quite. It does make sense, of course, what's just been said. But of course, we need this to be adopted by the council first. Then it goes back to the working group. Then the working group will actually go through it and come up with some, maybe 4 or 5 items that we can actually do something about immediately, and then come back to the council about that.
Good. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, quite a few of the things I was going to say has been said already. Just a couple of points really on the last discussion that has just been had that Councillor Cheadle brought forward. I mean, I understand his points. I think the problem with this area is such a big area, isn't it? And I think we do need to be focused. And as Councillor Davis has just said, that's very much the intention of the group. I mean, we're kind of we've got to do something. Something's got to change, and so in a sense we've got no choice but to deliver things anyway. But I just wanted to add my thanks to the working group and for the hard work they've done. The report's a really good report, and it does give us an opportunity to move forward as an authority, and actually to to kind of trailblaze as well, actually, and be an example to other authorities. I know that the group are working in conjunction with the county council, and in a sense the county council are overseeing all of it. But I think there's an opportunity for us as a relatively small district council to actually set some examples in some of these things, and I really commend the group on that. And my final point, just in response to Councillor Daniel and her comment about the verges, I know that Councillor Sellis touched on this earlier on. I mean, the county council obviously are responsible for cutting verges, and then, as Councillor Daniel quite rightly said, that the verges that are cut these days are only the ones with that have a safety aspect, so visibility displays on junctions and that kind of thing. I mean, I certainly as a county member I get a lot of complaints about overgrown verges, but we don't have the money to do it, and there is a feeling that it's better left anyway, as Councillor Daniel said. So I just wanted to add that in. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Spedigue.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Briefly, to echo everyone else's sentiments, thanks to Drew and his team and to Councillor Davies and the working group. It's a huge piece of work. I mean, I think Councillor Cheadle made a good point about nailing down a few key issues which are focused on, but this is very much a catch-all umbrella to cover the whole subject, and you've got to start somewhere, and this looks like a really good way of tackling this huge subject. Interesting to hear what Councillor Pearce had to say about motor vehicles, internal combustion vehicles, and I think he's right. I think the national strategy in terms of motor vehicles over the next 20 years will certainly take care of this problem in a fairly natural way. I don't see that as being a particularly big problem specific to us. And finally, I'd just like to say that I'm quite looking forward to seeing how this strategy shapes West Devon Borough Council's decision making in the coming couple of years. I think it's quite an exciting time, and I look forward to seeing what happens next.
Thank you. Councillor Ridges, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Really, I'd like to an excellent report. Obviously, a lot of officer time, a lot of work that's gone into it, and thank you to Councillor Davis. I'd like to pick up on Councillor Mott's point. I think she makes a very good point. We mustn't be seen to castigate the meat eaters, especially of sustainably produced beef and also lamb, because I think we in this area, we don't overfarm. Our farmers have excellent environmental records. It's really low stocking levels, and we are producing in such a sustainable way in West Devon. And I think our farming community needs to be commended. And it's the sort of meat, OK, it has a bit of a premium on. And if you go to companies like Dartmoor Beef and Sheep, yes, it does. But it's good for the it's in tune with the environment. And I will fully endorse her point. And also, I'd just like to thank Councillor Vachon as well for his science behind the automotive argument as well. I think he makes some very sound points, and I won't feel too bad about jumping in a classic car and popping down to the next meeting when we are open. Some good points, good debate, well made. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any more debates for anybody else? No.
Mr. Mayor, before we go to a vote, can I just say a couple of things?
I was about to ask if you wanted to. Yes.
That's fine. It's only. I mean, I think the word was used sinister. I mean, it wasn't our intention to be sinister, so apologise for that as a working group or as officers. We did have some lengthy debates about some of the key things which have actually come up in the debate today, and within the working group, we thought actually let's put it to the full council, and then the council can decide what they want to add in and leave out. But we did start off, last December. We started off with over 170 recommendations from officers and from councillors to what should be included. So I'd like to thank Adam Williams, our climate change officer, for putting all of this together to actually. He had a massive document to somehow reduce and put into a strategy, which he's done, and I think he's should be well and truly recommended and cheered on for that one. So basically, I think we've got there, and we now got something to work with. So really, all I'm doing is looking for members' endorsement, so we can take this forward, and actually the working group can go back and meet again, and then bring other things to council.
Okay, thank you. I see that Councillor Sellis would like to say something else.
Well,
normally debate, you get one go at it.
I know, Mr. No, but it's because I've created a hornet's nest by using the word sinister, haven't I? Yes. So if you'll indulge me for, because I just felt bad, reading that. I just don't think it's our responsibility to dictate to people or anything. Well, actually, that's maybe a bit harsh as well. But I just felt that it was unfavourable, really. Just emphasising on that, and also it's not my intention to be damning or anything like that, but I sensed that when I read that. So okay. There we are. So
thank you. Right, no more debate, so if we can go to the vote, and if we could do this by exception. If anyone has got any concerns about that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If we just give it a couple of seconds. So we're voting members by exception. So if any members aren't willing to accept parts 1 to 5 with the amended part 1, please indicate in the chat box now. Thank you. There appears to be nobody typing, Mr. Mayor, so we can take that as unanimously approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item 8, Planning Delegation Scheme. Councillor Mott, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm sure members will be fed up with listening to me by the time we get to the end of this meeting. I'd like to introduce this report following concerns raised after the granting of an outline planning application. A review of the planning scheme of delegation was requested and carried out. This report and the attached scheme detail the changes, expectations and responsibilities of both officers and members. Subject to agreement, I would also like to amend definition point 1, please, where to head instead of community lead for clarity, because the shortening of the wording is HOP, and under 5.1.2 to include an S in brackets after the word member to reflect the multiple wards, please. Mr. White, I will forward those to you so that you've got them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no questions. Yep, Mr. Mayor, you're on mute.
Mr. Mayor.
It's come off. Well done. Any questions, please?
Councillor Cheadle's first, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I remain concerned about one small but I think important aspect of the proposed recommendations, and that is the vexed one of officers seeking delegation, allowing 5 working days, hearing nothing and assuming consent. And the reason I'm concerned about it is it's not out of the ordinary for members' IT equipment to misbehave in such that they may not see that immediately or may not be able to reply via email. And also, members may be away for reasons various and, in a sense, miss the opportunity that's been given to them. So I'd like to ask if we could introduce a protocol, or maybe reintroduce a protocol to be more precise. There was a time when if members were unavailable to communicate or away on holiday or whatever, they would inform Democratic Services that they were going to be away or they couldn't respond by email. That would be communicated throughout the council so that planning officers, for example, would know that the member was away, and therefore there was no point in seeking a delegation until the member returned or was able to communicate. So it's not a significant change, but I think it's an important one, and I'd ask if that could be considered. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
In this instance, I would have to refer to Mr. Fairbairn. There he is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Mott. The drafting allows for, or reflects in part, the protocol that Councillor Cheadle has referred to. But of course, this what it also includes is the provision which says that if members are going to be away, then they can inform or nominate another ward member to be consulted in their, or another member to be consulted in their absence. And this is coming back to roles and responsibilities, because say, for example, a member goes on leave or goes away for a fortnight. Are we saying that the decision should not be taken for another fortnight plus another 5 days? In which case that brings into question the timetable and performance of the council in terms of its decision making, and clearly this is not about putting obstacles in the way to decisions that should be properly made. So what I would say is that I think the scheme as drafted, which extended the period for consultation to reflect the fact that there had been IT problems, now and to the 5 working days, that strikes the balance between efficiency and responsibility, and I think does ensure that decisions would continue to be made speedily, but equally members who are not able to or not in a position to be consulted are disadvantaged. So I'm not sure that I would actively encourage members to go down the route of imposing another obstacle in the way of a decision being made. Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Mayor.
Can I come back, Mr. Mayor? I just asked Mr. Verburn, what about the case where the officer emails me, my IT equipment's broken, so I don't receive the email for 3 days. I then pick it up. I've got 1 day left.
We could continue putting any sort of period into the. I think we could go on forever deciding on a particular period.
What I was actually suggesting is that it would be the responsibility of members, knowing that their IT wasn't working or knowing that they weren't available to comment, to let the head of Democratic Services know that they were out of contact. That could then be communicated to the planning officers, who would know that they'd need to find some other way of solving their problem.
But if the Mr. Mayor, if I may, if the member has a problem with their IT, then it's beholden on them to report it as quickly as possible. And given that the time period has already been extended from the 3 to the 5 working days to reflect the fact that there may be issues of that nature, it doesn't seem that it's going a little too far to amend it still further so that the period extends even further.
I wasn't actually suggesting that we amend the period. I was suggesting that if a member's IT is broken and he can't communicate and can't receive the message that he needs to communicate, if he lets the head of democratic services know, other mechanisms could be put into place, like a telephone call.
Mr. Bates would like to make comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I absolutely understand the point that Councillor Cheadle is making. I also respect the advice that David has provided. It's utterly important that we do strike a balance between officers' responsibilities and those of members. I think that the proposed recommendation on the delegation does that as a matter of course. Nevertheless, there's always going to be circumstances where, for whatever reason, unbeknownst to members, they're not going to be available. I think it's reasonable in that context that members should be asked and expected to provide that information to Darryl. And I think at that point, if they do so and it's a temporary problem, we should as officers be prepared to pause a decision-making process. I'd like to think that our forward planning in future would be good enough such that the number of occasions where it would be problematic to do so for just a day or two would be quickly overcome. If that wasn't the case, we would have to seek an alternative way of making the decision. So I think with that caveat, I'd be happy to accept your proposition, Councillor Cheadle, as a reasonable and practical, pragmatic way forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Cheadle.
Yes, as long as that's fully understood and sort of it becomes an adopted protocol.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ridges.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I've been in business 30 odd years now, dealing with clients all the time. If I can't get hold of them, what I tend to do is pick up the phone and just give them a call on the mobile. I've had this in the past with councillors. I just don't want to get all administrative, bureaucratic and sort of about it. Just give us a call on the mobile. That's what it's there for. Let me know that it's going to happen and then we can answer. I think that's a pragmatic and sensible way forward. You know, if you're uncontactable, you're uncontactable. But, you know, practically all of us have mobile phones. And I just think that's a sort of simple, easy, informal solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hipsey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I don't want to get down into a great tool, but I wonder if there's a technical solution to this, or at least partly a solution to this, where we could use a shared calendar. So, and this is not going to work for IT failures, obviously, but if we know we're going on leave or something like that, could members perhaps put that sort of information in a shared calendar so that officers knew that we weren't available? Just a suggestion.
Comment? Answer? I guess all these things are possible.
Could I just make a comment to Councillor Ridges? Although I applaud his suggestion about mobile phones, I happen to live in an area that doesn't have a mobile phone connection.
Mr. Mayor, I'm conscious a lot of members are putting comment in the box. We were technically in questions. We haven't had a proposed moved and seconded yet.
Yeah, I was about to say the same thing. Yeah. So if we can just go to questions, and I'll try and pick up the comments as debate rather than comment, please.
Councillor Sellis is on the list of questions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Sellis.
Thanks. Don't we just click in whether we're available or not? You have that option already, Councillor Hipsey. Maybe officers could just help me, you know.
Yes, I thought we had that option that we actually tell officers and the whole council if we're not available. But it's whether all the officers get that information.
Mr. Mayor, if I could come back, I think that we have a sensible proposition. David has put the official and formal line in terms of the formal delegation that's set out in the paper. What has been suggested by Councillor Cheadle is a pragmatic and practical solution which puts the onus on the member concerned to advise Darryl in the event that they are temporarily unavailable for council business. At that point, Darryl can communicate that information to DM colleagues and we can put a pause on a decision on a particular application, unless there's some particular urgency about that, which requires it to be determined sooner. As I said, I'd like to hope that in future we will be planning better in terms of our forward planning of decisions, and that won't be a problem. So I think we do have a practical solution ahead of us. If you'd like to take that option, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Mott, are we able to add this in?
If Councillor Cheadle wishes to put that forward as a proposal, personally, I am happy with the paper and the recommendation and the scheme of delegation as is set out. As Mr. Fairbairn has advised, all eventualities are covered within that document, and as mentioned in my introduction to the report, members have the responsibility to notify either their own leader or officers, or indeed Mr. White, as to any absence that they might be experiencing. So I would prefer to see it as it stands, and that's what I will be proposing unless there is an amendment put forward.
Thank you. Mr. Fairbairn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just going to say, if the proposal is agreed, could I ask that the precise wording is, rather than us try and draft it in committee or in council, could I ask that it's delegated to myself in consultation with Councillor Mott and Councillor Cheadle?
You happy with that, Councillor Cheadle?
I am.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'm aware we're still in questions, and Councillor Yelland has given notice of a wish to ask a question.
Yes, I'll be honest, this list has got somewhat mixed up. So, Councillor Yelland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's quite difficult to reword it as a question, but as the chairman of the Planning Licensing Committee, I do feel that perhaps before we sort of move this into us, where we've got a clear proposal that's come forward to be voted on, if there was going to be any amendments, is I mean, my question is actually talking about officers phoning members if they don't get a response through the IT. There's how many times should a message call, that should an office call? And the background to that question is it is something we have discussed as at chairman's briefing, and particularly around the extra workload for officers where maybe a ward member hasn't responded in a timely fashion. And essentially ward members should be checking their email every day, at least once a day. So if they find that their IT has gone down, this should be picked up very quickly. So that is my question. How many times should an officer call? What would be reasonable?
Anyone like to answer that?
Could I make a suggestion, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, please.
As Mr. Fairbairn has suggested, we could work on a simple protocol offline and bring that back at a later date for endorsement by the council.
Separate to this particular.
Yes, it's a slightly wider issue than just the delegation of authority on planning matters. It's a it's more a question of how councillors remain responsible and in touch for decisions that they need to make. So I'm sure between David Fairburn, myself and a few others, we can sort out a simple protocol that will cover this.
Okay. In the meantime, we'll stick to the recommendations that we've got. Councillor Ball, you have a question for clarity.
Mr. Mayor, I think you might have just answered my question. This talk of extra work is in a sense isn't changing what the recommendations are. We're going to be voting on the recommendations that are on the screen before us. Yes.
Yes, that's how I'm taking it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think, trying to go through this list, that's the end of questions. What I'm going to try and do is go back to who made the first comment, if I pick up the wrong one first.
Before you do, Mr. Mayor, we need a proposal
I was about
to be
to
seconded.
say, yeah, what we need to go is proposer and a seconder, please, Councillor Mott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In that case, can I please put forward to the council recommendations as detailed on the screens?
Thank you. Can we have a seconder, please?
I'm happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Debate.
So I think, Mr. Mayor, I think Councillor
Hipsey
has commented. I think Councillor Pearce was next in the list.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Pearce.
Councillor Hipsey, I think, was before me, Mr. Mayor. Sorry.
I think.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My comment was in answer to a previous speaker, so I'm finished.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick comment, actually, that members always used to have an obligation to inform the Democratic Services when they weren't going to be available, if it was 2 days or 2 weeks. And that seems to have slipped off the shelf now. So, you know, I at some point, we've got to bring this in where members are obligated to notify Democratic Services, Cathy Hoare and Darrell White, that they are not going to be available. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Sellis.
No, I've got no comment. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm just going through the comment lines instead of the questions. So, Councillor Yelland.
No, mine was dealt with. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. No, I've got my chat box scrolling on its own.
I think, Mr. Mayor, that actually
So
members who are in the chat box who've asked to speak have already done so, and there's a couple of members advising of their need to leave in due course. So I don't actually believe there's any other member in there putting the word comment or debate who hasn't addressed the meeting, Mr. Mayor. So I think, subject to any new comments being added, I think we are there in terms of actually getting through that list. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, my comment box has just come to a grinding halt, so I'll have to rely on you for a little while, Mr. White. So we go to the vote. Are we happy to vote by? I think we'd better actually vote by name on this one, please, Mr. White.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll go for an alphabetical order. I'm conscious some members are leaving or in the process of leaving, so I'll give members 2 bites at the cherry, so to speak, and if they don't come back, we'll assume they've left the meeting or are disconnected. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So therefore, as per the screens, members, Councillor Ball.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Bolton. I will try again in a minute. Councillor Bridgewater. Councillor Bridgewater. Try again. Councillor Cheadle.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Crozier.
4.
Thank you. Just checking. Councillor Daniel has left. Yeah. Councillor Davies.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Edmonds.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Ewings.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Hipsey.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Drury.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Kimber.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Leach.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Moody.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Mott.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Moyes.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Musgrave. Councillor Musgrave. Okay, Councillor Pearce.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Ratcliffe.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Renders.
Yes, 4.
Thank you, Councillor Ridges.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Samuel.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Sellis.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Southcott.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Spettigue.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Vashon.
4.
Thank you. I see Councillor Woods join the meeting. Councillor Wood.
Hello. Yeah, sorry, I'll abstain because I haven't heard the discussion and everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Yelland.
4.
Thank you. And we'll just try again. Councillor Bolton. No. And Councillor Bridgewater. Okay. Thanks, members. That is therefore unanimous as per the recommendation on the screens and therefore declared carried. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item 9, Resource and Waste Management Strategy for Devon and Torbay. Councillor Mott, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report introduces the draft resource and waste management strategy detailed on pages 81 to 172 on your agendas. This draft has been approved by the Joint Working Committee in October 2020 for consultation and now seeks endorsement by us as a local authority to go for public consultation. This follows a review of the previous strategy in 2013 and reflects the general direction of travel both nationally and locally. Key targets are to contribute to net zero carbon for the county, reduce residual waste collection and increase the amount reused and recycled, while supporting work with external agencies to reduce, reuse and recycle. This document also allows for any possible central government initiatives going forward. Therefore, I would like to request council support of the recommendations as per page 75 of the papers.
Thank you sorry. Thank you very much. Any questions?
There doesn't appear to be any questions, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, my screen just went completely.
No problem, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Cheadle has put a question in the box.
Yes, Councillor Cheadle.
Thank you. It's a very quick and simple one, this. The title of this document, Strategy for Devon and Torbay, viewed from the sort of public seat, will be slightly confusing. So they'll probably think Torbay is in Devon. And then when they read it, they find it doesn't include Plymouth, which definitely is in Devon. So whilst I get it, and I'm sure councillors will get it in the sense that they understand the difference between a unitary authority being part of or not part of another organisation, I'm not sure the Great British public will understand it. Does that matter?
In answer to your question, Councillor Cheadle, and I'm sure Mrs. Savage will roundly correct me if I'm getting this wrong. Devon and Torbay are working together with their waste strategy, whereas Plymouth are carrying out their own strategy, hence the title. And I appreciate, yes, to the layperson, it might appear confusing, but this is what we're working with.
Thank you.
But if it appears confusing, it probably is confusing.
Yes.
Chair, would you like me to add anything to that?
Yes, if you could, please.
Yes, thank you. So Torbay and the Devon districts and Devon County Council are part of the Devon Authority Strategic Waste Committee. So together we've written this strategy Plymouth opted out of the Devon Authority's Strategic Waste Committee a few years ago and went their own way. Torbay, in fact, do have their own strategy, but it's much shorter, but they are still a partner in this one as well. So there's nothing conflicting in the two strategies. But I would admit it does seem quite confusing, the title.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bashall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just a strange one here on recommendation 2, where it's asking for consultation with the lead member for environment for any minor changes considered necessary. What I mean, minor? What sort of constitutes a minor change?
Would you like me to take that, Chair?
Yes, Mr. Savage.
So the point of bringing this to council today is to approve that it goes out for consultation to the public. It will then come back to the Devon Authority's Strategic Waste Committee, and once that's been approved there, it comes back again into councils. So before going on to Devon to be actually adopted. So there are a lot of hoops to jump through on the way. Any key changes to this, which are extremely unlikely because this also fits in with the National Waste Strategy, circular economy, and what we've just been hearing about as well, the climate change work we've been doing. So any key changes would, of course, come back. So any minor changes would be very small changes, such as, for example, minor typos. We're talking about changes to the actual formatting of the document. It might be a slight change to, for example, an updating. For in South Hams, the waste services are changing. If this document isn't actually completed before those waste services change, then that would be considered a minor change because it's not actually fundamentally changing the meaning of the document. Does that help?
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions?
There's none in the box, Mr. Matt.
So back to Councillor Mott, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In that case, I would like to propose the recommendations as detailed on the screen in front of you. Can I have a seconder, please?
Seconder.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. If we can vote by, no,
Mr. Mayor, we are in debate, Mr. Mayor, and Councillor Ball is up there.
If we can have debate instead of comments, please. Thank you, Mr. Ball. Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did write debate this time.
You did.
I just picking up Councillor Cheadle's point. I mean, I have some sympathy with what he said because, you know, obviously as sort of been a county member as well as a West Devon member, when people ask you a question, they don't really know, or actually, to be honest, care who's responsible for which bit. They just want it sorted, I guess. But I think there's an opportunity for us to potentially deal with this, as Jane mentioned. There is going to be a consultation, isn't there? So there's an opportunity that in the consultation blurb that we can do some preamble that explains, you know, what's happened, how we've got to this point. I mean, the county council obviously have a responsibility overall, and you know, so the strategy is kind of for everyone, and we're what I think, if I've understood it correctly, what we're agreeing to as you know, sort of from our perspective of delivering it locally, we're agreeing to this strategy. So as long as we explain that in the preamble for the consultation, then that goes part of the way. I mean, I accept that, you know, the take up of responses in the consultation we'll have to wait and see, but at least that'll be one way that we can kind of mitigate that misunderstanding. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any more debate? No. Okay.
None in the chat box, Mr. Mayor.
if we can go to the vote, and if we could do this by exception, please.
Thank you, members. Therefore, if any members aren't willing to accept the recommendation as per the screens, if they could please indicate so in the chat box, that'd be great. Just giving it a couple of seconds, Mr. Mayor, but no one seems to be typing, so I think we can accept that recommendation as unanimously approved. Thank you.
Splendid, thank you. Item 10, car park charges. Councillor Pearce, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, members and officers. It's been a long day, so I won't go into too much detail. This report requests members consider the recommendations to amend pay and display charges in accordance with Appendix A. The report seeks to implement a previous decision to amend parking charges by 4%. This report originally we should have been coming to you at the end of March, our full council meeting in March, and obviously when the first national lockdown came into being, it was all put on hold. These changes are not proposed to increase income, but instead the amendments are intended by an increase in cost of long stay parking to increase the turnover of parking bays, and as a result contribute to the vibrancy of towns in the borough by having extra parking or creating extra parking for people coming into our town, so we get a bigger footfall. Now, it's unfortunate some of you may think that we're still in the middle of the COVID, but we have to look at this long term, and the idea is that if council agree tonight to go forward with this, and the public consultation, which will take place in January, should it be approved tonight, we will bring the amendments in on the 1st of March or in early March, because April is quite early and it starts on the 1st of April. So it's a difficult one, but I feel that we've had another 12 months now for people to absorb these, and we're not increasing, as you will see by Appendix A, the number of increases on the short stay parking is virtually nil, and it's been done with consultation with the town councils. So I hope that you will support the recommendations, which is on the screen now, and I'm happy to take questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any questions?
There appear Councillor Sellis, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Sellis.
Thank you. When we get back to work, Councillor Pearce, how much will workers have to pay each week to if they need to car park in Tavistock? And also will they have are they able to get season tickets, etc., which will work out cheaper, hopefully? Thank you.
Councillor Pearce, do you have those figures?
I don't, not offhand, but I mean, the Appendix A shows the different charges in the different car parks in Tavistock. So I'm sure Councillor Sellis is capable of working out the weekly figure, depending on whether they're using the car park for 3 days a week or 5 days a week.
Yeah, sorry, please accept my apologies there.
Thank you. Councillor Crozier, please.
Thank you. The question I was going to ask is street parking. Are all streets limited to 1 hour?
Not all, no. Some are limited to 2 hours.
Is there any consideration of making charges on more than an hour then?
I'm right in saying the street parking is Devon County, isn't it?
Devon County, yeah. That's right, Mr. Mayor. Sorry to butt in.
That's okay.
Well, sorry if I'm inaccurate, but no, it's just the way, you know, I grew up in the metropolis and we had parking meters from 1955, so I'm well used to street parking charges.
If I could through you, Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
it has been considered about 4 or 5 years ago to introduce street charging, but it was decided not to go ahead with it. But when you see what the charges are in our cities now for street parking, it's quite eye-watering in some of the areas in Exeter and Plymouth.
Thank you. Councillor Yelland.
Thank you. Well, again, I'm not sure if Councillor Pearce is going to know the answer, but I'm just going to raise the question anyway. I'm thinking specifically about the Mill Road car park. I know there are limited parking permits. I'm not actually sure exactly how many there are, but it is limited, I think, from historical reasons, from when people used to be able to park before it was a sort of a proper official car park. And I just wondered if there would be any scope for increasing that number of parking permits, particularly thinking about residents who live in Mill Road, particularly who don't have any off-street parking outside their properties because of the way the lines are. And I think the permits have been specifically for the people who do live in Mill Road, but I don't think there's perhaps enough permits to go around, so to speak, and there is capacity, I believe, in the car park. I don't know if this has been considered or if it would be possible for it to be considered, because I realise it's separate to the actual parking charges that we're talking about here.
Yes, that's correct. There is a limit on the number of parking permits for quite obvious reasons, but I'm sure it's something that we might be able to look at, but I'm not promising I don't know if Mrs. Widdicombe is still with us, but perhaps she could answer that question. But I know that we have a good reason why there are limits on permits.
Hi, Councillor Pearce. Yes, I am here. Thank you. Yeah, no, we can look at that in the future. There's no reason why we can't. I think we just need to be mindful that we have enough pay and display spaces. But what I can do is I can look at the waiting list and the numbers that we have, and then obviously make that look at the consideration of that for the future.
Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Can we please stick to what we're actually looking at, please? So this is
Councillor Ball, Mr.
charges. Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate the opportunity to ask the question. Through you to Councillor Pearce, really. I know that when I was on the car parking working group a number of years ago, Mill Road usage was actually quite low in comparison to the other long stay car parks around the borough, and I wondered if usage has gone up in recent times. I'm not up to date with the data, because obviously if the usage hasn't gone up, then I'd like to come back about that in debate. But if I can ask that question, please, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Well, obviously the figures are distorted this year with the national lockdowns. But it is envisaged that will be increases in all our towns of the usage, because once we get through this COVID, I mean, we've got to look at the beyond COVID, I feel, and officers feel, and this is why we're bringing this forward to you today to come in to operation next spring. And, you know, with all our towns, there's going to be a significant increase in the use of the car parks once we get through this COVID situation. And, you know, we can't give accurate figures for the usage for any of the car parks at the moment, not compared to what they would be normally in normal usage time, because there's such big distortion with the number of lockdowns we've had this year.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. I accept those points. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Doesn't appear to be, Mr. Mayor.
No. So back to you, Councillor Pearce, to move the recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the recommendations as set out on your screen. There are 2 recommendations there. I think we can take them collectively if possible, as long as Mr. White is happy with that. And I move the recommendation as set out 1 and 2.
Thank you. I think we can do this by exception.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, before we do, if we could have a seconder, please.
I'll beg your pardon.
I'm happy to second that, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, sport for choice.
Councillor Ball wishes to make a point in debate, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
I apologise, Mr. Mayor, because I appreciate that we've been going a long time, but this is quite an important issue, and I thank Councillor Pearce for his hard work on this, and I hear the points he's made. I do have some concerns, though. I think looking to introduce this in the spring, we've obviously, as he quite rightly said, that we haven't had, the usage has been skewed by the fact that we've had the lockdowns and therefore less people travelling in and out of the town centres. We've touched on this earlier on when we were talking about COVID and the impact that that's had on our communities when we were talking about sort of the COVID recovery. I wonder if, putting this in for May, and this will go into the public realm, sends the wrong message because, in some respects, obviously we want to kind of see businesses recover and we want to see people come in and use the car parks. And I understand the point in relation to the trying to get usage through, but I'm not convinced that it will have that positive impact. I think people will obviously be short of a few bob here and there because of the situation. And I just think that we're possibly sending the wrong message at this point when we, in one hand, saying that we want to help recovery, but the next minute we're saying we want to take more money off people for car parking. I'm trying to say what people might say when they look at it. So I'm in 2 minds about this at the moment. I'm happy to go back to the debate, but and listen to the debate. But at the moment I'm slightly inclined to not agree this, but I'm happy to go back to the debate. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
May I come back, Mr. Mayor?
You're on mute, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, it wouldn't come off again. Certainly can, Councillor Pearce.
I understand where Councillor Ball is coming from, but there's going to be a huge amount of pent-up demand. I know there's a goodly number of people who have really suffered with the COVID, and they've suffered financially, but there's also quite a large percentage of the population who have not been out wining and dining or going on holiday, and the significant amounts of money that people have got. And once that we get over this COVID period, I think we'll see a pretty significant uplift in the way people, and especially people from up the country, coming down here on holiday, and we have to be prepared for that. And I think this is what we're looking at. And I'm not being derogatory to local people, but they've got the Mill Road, not the Market Street car park, where the charges there are not changing. That'll be 3 years now that those charges have been the same, if this is implemented next spring. So I think we are looking after the local people, and working with the towns as we have done now with supporting them with the Christmas parking. So I think we need to be looking at the bigger picture for the future. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Kimber.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to say I support the recommendations, and I think that the increases are very reasonable, and I'd like to put on record a thanks to Councillor Pearce for consulting with the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Moody.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Kimber has just stolen my thunder. I was just going to say, thank you very much to Councillor Pearce and Mrs. Widdicombe for the work they put into this. It's not, increasing charges isn't easy at any particular time. But when you look at the history where we reduced the costs down to £2 a day right across the board, that was a major decrease in car parking charges, and what we've now got is a modest increase and a reasonably well thought out policy, and I will support it.
Thank you. Councillor Sellis.
Thanks. I'm reluctant to support this because I don't think increasing car parking charges at the moment is necessarily wise. I hope that we do have a large percentage of visitors wining and dining, and I hope we do see a significant uplift in staycations, as Councillor Pearce is saying. However, that again is sort of finger in the air stuff, isn't it? And people are actually, the unemployment is going to be up and everything like that as well. So I'm in two minds at the moment. I also, just for information, Tavistock has resisted on-street car parking charging at Devon County Council. There was exceptional reluctance to have any on-street car parking when it was looked at about 10 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ridges.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the 22 years I've been as a councillor here, I've never had one letter, one comment about how expensive the car park charges are at all. We had quite a lot of visitors down here from up country and over the summer when we weren't in lockdown, and they were astonished at how cheap our car parking charges are. Astonished. I think Councillor Pearce, great consultation, very good, short, pithy document. I'm going to support it wholeheartedly. I just wish we put the car parking charges up more to ration the demand I think that he rightly anticipates. So shame they're not going up anymore, but I think that I will be wholeheartedly supporting a very good document. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more debate? Going by the comments to date, I think we will have to go for a full vote, Mr. White.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So for those listening to the stream, I believe we have 24 members now on the call. And again, in alphabetical orders, members, Councillor Ball.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Bridgewater.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Cheadle.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Crozier.
4.
Councillor Davies.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Edmonds.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Ewings.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Hipsey.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Jury.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Kimber.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Leach.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Moody. Councillor Moody.
Mr. White, his laptop has died or whatever, and he's struggling to get back in.
I'm
Okay,
sorry.
thank
Are you talking about me?
you. Councillor Moody.
Yes.
I've just connected again.
It's on mute now.
Sorry, Councillor Moody, we're taking the vote now, and it's come around to your turn.
Yeah,
We're voting on the recommendation as per the screens, and that's a vote for 4. Thank you. Councillor Mott.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Moyes.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Musgrave.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Renders.
4. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Ridges.
More. Sorry, I mean 4.
Thank you. Councillor Samuel.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Sellis.
Reluctant 4.
Thank you, Councillor Southcott.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Vashon.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Wood.
4.
Again, Councillor Yelland.
4.
Thank you, members. That's therefore 23 votes in favour with 1 abstention, and that recommendation is therefore approved. Thank you, members.
Thank you. Item 11, Annual Health and Safety Policy Statement. Councillor Jury, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members have in front of you a document which relates to the annual review of the health and safety policy statement. This gives us a chance every year to amend the policy, and the amended policy is shown at Appendix 1. The amendments reflect in the main changes to the senior management team. The proposal that will be coming forward will ask that the council agrees to the signing off of the policy by the heads of practice, the head of paid service and the leader. Are there any questions about the policy, members?
Councillor Mott, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Under page 186, section 5.10, the last sentence talks about the internal health and safety service and the health and safety pages on the intranet. Now, I'm sad enough to have tried finding these pages and this service. I did finally follow them. I did finally find them, and I have actually accepted the policies, which as members I imagine we are meant to do. So I'm just curious, actually, how many members have looked at the display screen equipment policy and completed the self-assessment, for example, or even are we as members even expected to accept and fill in these forms? So I was just curious as to who monitors this and what the reporting line of this is, if you like, with regard to us as members. And also, is it possible, please, to have an easy link to find the policy pages so that we can find them? Because at the moment, it is a very roundabout route to be able to get to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mott. That's a very pertinent observation. And my understanding is that as members, we should be completing these risk assessments and signing them off. We will look into that and make sure that that is more accessible to members and that it's monitored so that we make sure everyone does that. So we'll take a check on that. Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, if I might
yes.
add to that, please. My apologies, I should have included it before. Could I suggest then that we look into the possibility of a member being responsible for health and safety? I appreciate that it comes under your remit, Councillor Jury, but with regard to the reporting, etc., because we never seem to sort of get any updates as to how health and safety or any near misses, for example, as members. Thank you.
Okay, yes, we'll make sure that happens.
Thank you. Councillor Crozier.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to echo the thoughts of Councillor Mott there, especially on letting the members know where there are instances of people having to report or serious reports. My question is about 5.12.3, threats against councils, and I think in this particular instance it's rather low key for that particular serious subject. The first instruction is to make no attempt to open what is suspicious mail, place the package carefully to the nearest firm service and telephone Follerton House or Kilworthy facilities. I think the first thing they should do is put down the package and evacuate the room that they're in, or the area they're in, and then inform the line manager, and also probably do a 999 because we're dealing with serious. It's better to ramp it up early rather than take the consequences if it was wrong.
Councillor Jerry.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. I think there is, it does, as you say, look a little bit lightweight, and I'd be really happy to have a look at that with the appropriate officer, and look at some increased, what's the right word? Just increasing the advice there so that we make sure that it reflects the potential seriousness of the situation. I think Mr. Luscombe would like to come in and comment.
Thank you, Leader, and through you, Mayor. Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor Crozier. There is a more in-depth bomb threat procedure which is documented and within place within the council, where the people who come into the post in contact with the post regularly are briefed on and trained on. So just to give you some assurance there that the information within this overarching document is only a very brief summary, and that information is given in more detail and trained on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is about home working. I hope it's relevant. Apologies if it's not, but given that officers are now doing the vast majority of their work at home, does this policy in any way extend into a home working environment? Is it a separate policy, or is it something that we don't have to consider? Thank you.
Mr. Luscombe.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the question. The health and safety at work requirements extend to all your places of work. So those people working at home are still covered under the council's duty of care, and indeed have a duty of care to themselves. Early on in the COVID pandemic response, we did write out to all of our staff with regards to how they were ensuring their own health and safety in new workplaces which were at home, and we've put in some measures to make sure that staff are adequately protected against any of the risks that they might come across. And I believe there's ongoing conversations between staff and managers as and when different problems arise. So it has been something that we've looked at quite closely over the last few months. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Luscombe. Can I also add to that these things are, of course, never quite tablets of stone. They are, we have to be responsive as situations change. And I think the whole COVID thing and home working is one of those situations where the rules have changed. And I have had some conversations this morning with the Chief Executive about how we can look at patterns of work and just making sure that people are looking after themselves physically and mentally whilst working in a home environment, as well as the other physical measures that I think Councillor Edmonds was maybe referring to. So these things are considered regularly and will be updated in the policy as they happen.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Doesn't appear to be, Mr. Matt.
So I don't ask Councillor Jury to move this recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could move the recommendation, which is shown on your screens and is on page 173 of the papers that have been distributed.
Okay. Any debate?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, can we just have a seconder, please?
Oh, I've done it again. Beg your pardon.
I'll
Can we have a
second that,
second?
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed. Any debate?
There appears to be no debate, Mr. Mayor.
So if we can take this by exception, please, Mr. White.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, members. If any member is not willing to agree to this recommendation, if they could indicate so in the chat box, please. Just give it a couple of seconds, Mr. Mayor. But I can't see anybody typing, so I think we can take that one as unanimously approved. Thank you, members.
Thank you. Item 12, Public Space Protection Order, Dog Controls. Councillor Mott, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So with following this report, the council is obligated to review its public space protection orders on a 3-yearly basis and has carried out a public consultation from June the 1st to July 31st this year. Responses were limited and mainly received from Oakhampton Town Council and Beer Alston. As part of the review, comments were limited on the addition of 3 articles as detailed on page 198 of the papers. Following the consultation, it is proposed only to update the public space protection order, with 2 of those as detailed under the recommendations on page 195 of your papers. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Councillor Ewings first, Mr. Mayor.
I'm really sorry, but I can't actually get into the report at the moment. But may I just ask, I've read somewhere that dogs should not be off leads on roads with 30-mile speed limit. Is that coming in as part of this document as well, please? Oh, yes, there it is. I can see it. Thank you.
I think it's also part of the highway code. But yes, Councillor Hipsey.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Can I just ask, please, about the consultation? I understand that it obviously occurred over 2 months in a very odd time, but exactly how many responses were made? I've looked at the various spreadsheets, and the statistics seem to be broken down into different questions. But I'd like to know just how many individual public citizens replied to this consultation, please.
Councillor Mott.
So you will be able to see all of the responses that we had as detailed on the spreadsheet. When it comes, so that's the number of responses that we received. So it would have been sent out to all of the parish councils. They would have been asked to have publicised it, as well as ourselves asking for any comments to be made.
So can I ask what that number actually is, please?
Without actually going down and counting them up, Councillor Hipsey, it is as detailed in the spreadsheet.
Thank you very much.
32, 33.
Okay. Councillor Crozier. Councillor Crozier. I'll come back. Councillor Cheadle.
Yeah, just a point of clarification, please. The recommendation about dog owners carrying poo bags, is that throughout West Devon?
Yep.
Or is it in sort of designated areas? I'm thinking of dog walkers on the moor, for instance.
That is across West Devon. So as it says that it would apply across the borough. So it is a requirement that dog walkers are requested, and I think that is a general requirement anyway. It's just making sure that we have got our PS our orders up to date. I'm sure Mrs. Bowen will, if she's on the call, will help me with that as well.
Mrs. Bowen.
Councillor Leach.
That's okay. I was trying to see if Mrs. Bowen was on the call.
I can't see her on the call, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Luscombe.
So the implication of that, sorry, the implication of that is wherever you are in West Devon with a dog, if the dog fouls, it's your responsibility to pick it up and put it in the container that you're obliged to carry. Is that right?
Indeed.
Throughout West Devon, not the open moor.
Yeah, if it helps, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Luscombe's on the put comment in the box.
I was trying to get Mr. Luscombe in, but yeah. So Ian, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I think Councillor Cheadle's clarified his own question. I think you're quite right in your summary there. So I nothing further to add. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think that's a pretty big change that will be. It'll be interesting to see how that's communicated, policed, and enforced?
Yes, is the answer to that, I think. Councillor Vachon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is really regarding the enforcement and fixed penalty notices, as in 3.3. Obviously, localities team have had enforcement training that allows them to issue the penalty notices. But what sort of evidence would they actually need to do that? Would that be sort of hard evidence, photographic evidence, or something that could be recorded, or is it just purely visual? Thank you.
Who would like to answer that one? Ian.
Thank you, Mayor. The enforcement officers will be required to patrol, and if they see a person in contravention of any of these requirements, then we will take a proportionate approach to enforcement. I would suggest that would follow along the same lines, that the police take their enforcement action by providing advice in the first instance, and then, if necessary, to take the details of that person by recording them into their notebook in terms of their observations, and then that entry into the notebook can be used as evidence in the future. It's not intended to be taking photos of people at this stage. I think my experience is that qualified professional officers are often successful in administering enforcement action just by recording their observations in their notebooks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm looking at the risk implication, which is at the end of the report. I think it's page 211. I fully support these recommendations. I think it's an absolutely long overdue move. But it says in the risk box here, poor enforcement performance will lead to customer dissatisfaction, which will impact on the Borough Council's reputation. This is going to be policed by localities. They do a fantastic job. They have a very wide range of responsibilities. I know we're probably short of resource in that area at the moment. So whilst I welcome the introduction of these, if it's passed this evening, but I have a slight concern just on that sentence. Poor enforcement will lead to customer dissatisfaction. If we're going to introduce it, we need to be able to back it up so people will respect it and make the recommendations actually work, which is long overdue. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Ian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may respond, I think that what that is alluding to is if we put these rules in place, we have to show that we are willing to take action based on the rules. But at the same time, that action needs to be proportionate to the issue that we're facing. And one would hope that the training that we give to our officers would mean that they were able to take a balanced view in terms of enforcement. So hopefully that clarifies that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cruz here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, I didn't demute my microphone last time.
Yeah, I missed you.
In the Beer Alston Recreation Ground, we've had an ongoing war between football players and dog owners for many, many years. And this year we decided to take action and try and resolve the problems. And at my suggestion, we did a couple of days survey, one day, 1 week, and one weekend day before we knew anything about this coming out. And then we distributed leaflets for the survey we did to 1,400 homes on the peninsula. And from the 1,400 homes, and this will help Councillor Hipsey, we had 326 valid replies, I think it was, and we had further replies which were disregarded because either they came after the end date or they were from a household that had already answered husband and wife sort of situation, both putting their pennyworth in. And as a result of that, we sent the results of our survey off to yourselves. And unfortunately, in this report, there's a number of errors concerning our report. And I don't know whether you wish me to highlight them now, but page 196, it talks about Beer Alston Council. In fact, it's Beer Farrers Council. And then on page 198, similarly again. What we and on page 199.3, it talks about a partially fenced football pitch. Now, I'm not quite sure that causes me concern, because we have a fully fenced football pitch which has been wired in order to stop dogs coming on it completely. And I know when Honey Foskett visited us in February, the wire wasn't there, but we gave permission after talking to her for this to be wired off. But we also have 2 other pitches which are used ad hoc when we have 3 youth teams who play during the winter, and they play on smaller pitches, and they mark out their pitches and put a temporary rope around those pitches in order to, which they have to do under FA rules, to stop overzealous parents getting too near or getting involved. And that happens when they're playing matches or training sessions. And I mention training sessions because they're not always matches, there's training sessions. But what we did ask for within our survey was whether the main football pitch should be no dogs at all. And we had a 90% response agreeing to that particular question, and that isn't in this report. So I would wish that the report be amended in order to reflect what we asked for when we sent our deliberations into you at the end of July. That is the main question. I'd like to see that be substantiated.
If I can just come in here, I asked a similar question. It's not specifically about your pitches, but I read that dogs must be kept under control on a lead on or near football sports pitches when there's an organised event going on. And I wanted to know whether we could change that and have it dogs on leads at all times when on or near playing pitches. And I was told, unfortunately, we can't, because that's a national thing. It's not just something we can change. It's something for government to change. But if we got an officer who can confirm what I've just said, that might answer the question why it's not being included.
Mr. Mayor, I actually totally agree with you. And the legislation is very weak as far as allowing dogs not to invade pitches, keeping them under control, because we've had players chased across fields, across the football pitch. So it is a very real situation. And the waters have been muddied somewhat in recent years because the FA's rules have got very complex in fencing off pitches for certain leagues and fencing off pitches temporarily to keep parents off pitches and things like that. And unfortunately, there are people out there, and our village is no exception to others, I suspect, that we have people who don't believe they should lose that area even when kids are playing football for a couple of hours on a Sunday. And what worries me more is the fact that you'll get kids playing up there informally when it isn't a formal practice session or match, and they have to run the risk of people's dogs running around loose.
Yeah. Mr. Luscombe wants to make a comment, I expect.
Thank you, Mayor, and I appreciate it's late on. I don't want to prolong the discussion too long, but picking up on Councillor Crozier's point, I think if there is a a footballer versus dog debate, then I certainly, if anyone knows me, knows I land on the side of the footballer. But I can sympathise with some of the things that he is saying, certainly. But I do think that within the report, although I'm not the author of the report, I have had some oversight. It does appear to me to mention dog exclusion from a partially fenced unmarked playing field. And my comment would be, if a dog is allowed to foul in the open air, and it's not picked up, then wherever that might be, it would be an offence and officers could act. But what I will also say to Councillor Crozier is, if we have got some specific intelligence of somebody causing a particular problem, perhaps it's one or two people in Beer Alston with their dogs who are allowing this, there are other means that we can use in terms of antisocial behaviour to try and curtail their activity. So I would invite Councillor Crozier to have that discussion with me, perhaps offline, and we can see if we can unpick that particular problem by a different means, and then just try and keep the document as you have, to what's being considered. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Luscombe. In respect to that, we have had the police involved on more than one occasion, and they have interviewed at least 3 people in the last 12 months.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sellis.
Thank you. I'm glad that the report recognises that most dog owners are responsible. My question is, what is our council going to do to remind people who dog walk on Dartmoor? What are we going to do to remind them that they do need to pick up dog mess? I will declare an interest. I walk my dog pretty well every day on the moor, and it was awful. I was this huge dog went, and I said to this lady, "Oh, excuse me, would like a dog bag, poo bag?" And she went, "Oh no." And clearly on my own, I wasn't going to confront her. So what are we going to do to work with Dartmoor National Park to remind dog owners that they still have to pick up the dog muck on the moor? Thank you.
Councillor Mott.
I was going to say, with the silence from Mr. Luscombe, I think I'm getting this one.
Sorry.
All I can say, Councillor Sellis, is that we, of course, will work with all of our colleagues across all authorities with our messaging for dog owners to be responsible and to pick up after them. Thank you, Mr. Luscombe.
Thanks.
Excellent response. Sorry, it's too late for me. I couldn't keep myself awake and type at the same time.
Yes. No.
Just to say, I think that this document talks about enforcement powers. In my experience, enforcement is an expensive way of getting people to do what they should do. Advice and education is much cheaper. So I think whilst this is a string to our bow, it's not the only one. And as Councillor Mott says, I think that advice and education for dog walkers is essential to go along with this. Thank you.
Thank you. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. I don't think the heavy hand, we should be dog friendly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Ridges, thanks for your patience.
Yeah, what worries me, if this is going to apply on the moor, and we do see this round in my ward, is that what will happen is that dog walkers will go out on the moor with their plastic bags. They'll get back to an area right next to the moor, and they'll tie it on the barbed wire, as they always do if the bins aren't there. So it's the work, and I doubt there'll be bin provision for it. So if you're saying we're going to, you've got to carry a plastic bag on the moor, this is an absolute disaster. Everywhere around the moor, we'll just see bags of dog turd tied up, which would be an absolute eyesore, an environmental hazard to all the residents living by. Flick it with a stick. As I represent, I haven't had any complaints about dog fouling on the moor ever. I've had them on, obviously, domestic paths and in and around villages. That's where this should apply. I hope I haven't got the wrong end of the stick on this one, but it really, really worries me, the implication of what this of what will happen here. Thank you.
It's a really good point, that actually.
The wrong end of the stick is quite apt if you look at where that expression comes from, but I'll leave it at that.
Well, flick it with a stick. That's what we used to say.
Yeah, I know. It's just that back in history, that had a different meaning. Councillor Yelland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am aware of time marching on, so I don't really want to take up too much time. I did have several questions, but I think I'll just throw them out there. I don't think there'll be particularly an answer that can be given. I'm just thinking about things like a lot of dog fouling takes place late at night and early in the morning, i.e. when the dog walkers are intentionally not picking up. And it's how this can be dealt with by enforcement, where a dog is let out on its own late at night to do its business. And how action can be carried out where people refuse to give enough personal details to enable a fixed penalty notice to be applied. Just some of the questions that I sort of was thinking about. And in the report itself, under item 3.2, says the Public Space Protection Order will provide the localities team with a uniform set of standards across the borough that will make enforcement straightforward. I was wondering if it would be possible for members to also have a copy of that, have sight of that, so that when we get contacted, because I know it's those of us who do live in towns rather than perhaps rural areas, we do get a lot of contact from people complaining about dog fouling on pavements outside front doors, which usually is occurring overnight, and it would be helpful to be able to give clear indications as to how the procedure would work. Thank you.
I think in answer to your last question, Councillor Yelland, the order is actually detailed within the papers following the report. And unfortunately, as Mr. Luscombe has already replied, this is only one string to the bow. It is almost like a last resort, if you like. It is a document that allows the locality officers to apply consistency across the board. And we rely on education and good common sense, if I can apply that to the general public, to pick up after their dogs and be responsible.
Thank you. Councillor Richards, I probably didn't get your answer.
Oh, sorry. I think the only comments I have made are that's the question and comment that I've asked a question, and I got effectively the answers that it would apply on the moor. And I'm just saying this is an absolute environmental disaster. It already is in Drew Stainton and around Fingal Bridge, of dog turd tied everywhere on strings, on trees. It's appalling down at Fingal Bridge. You ought to come down and see it. So this blanket approach is so wrong, but I'll leave that for the comment. I think we're still in questions, aren't we?
We are.
And debate. But just be minded, members, please. This was started up as a very urban village issue, and it's blown out of all proportion, and it's very worrying.
Yeah,
Mr. Luscombe.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Richards, if people are hanging bags of poo on trees and on barbed wire fences, as you suggest, then again we can use legislation to try and deal with that. That would be an offence of littering in itself. So if you have got particular hotspots and problem areas, then we could focus some of our resource on those areas to get people down there to give advice and then to take enforcement action if that advice isn't heeded. And in response to, I think, Councillor Yelland's question about names and addresses, there is specific legislation that we've empowered our enforcement officers with, which allows them to take details from a person, and it's an offence not to give them, and it's an arrestable offence that they could call a police officer to come and assist them with if those details weren't given. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I want to come back on that one. That's utterly ridiculous, because there are hundreds of probably hundreds of miles of perimeters of the moor that walkers will come down, tourists included, who are all walking on the place, and just dispose of their dog bags at the side of the road, of many do, and just to think, oh well, yes, this is a problem hotspot. There'll be many problem hotspots. Sorry, I'm gobsmacked.
Yes, the hotspots are national. I used to look after big estates, and going back years, as soon as they had little plastic bags, they started to create nests. Yeah, it's difficult. Mr. Molyneux.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you. It is evening as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think just to put some perspective into this, I think the orders are a generic order which enable us to enforce if there is a problem in a particular area. Clearly, we don't have localities officers that can cover the whole of Dartmoor. And I think the idea of having that generic order is because 95%, 98% of dog owners are responsible and do the right thing. And I think that this is, if there are problem areas, we've got a generic order that we can then look at taking enforcement action in those specific issues. And I think in terms of perspective, you know, that I think hopefully that will allay your concerns. Sorry about that, Mr. Mayor. Hopefully that will allay your concerns, Councillor Ridges.
If I'm allowed to come back on that, I think no. Because I think the problem is you're setting a rule that so many people will follow. They think they've got to pick it up when they're on the moor. Then nobody complains about dog shit in the middle of the moor where they're walking. But you're setting a rule that actually you now need to pick it up and dispose of it. So you're creating a problem where no problem existed. And, you know, people are pretty law-abiding, law enforcement. But if many will just, instead of having the dogs doing a poo on the moor, they'll pick it up now, and that certain percent will dump it in and around the car park at the multitude of ones that there are all around it. It's by creating the law that's creating the problem here. And we're totally moving from a domestic issue that we had and a very good enforcement and a very good dog fouling operation to applying it somewhere it just doesn't need to apply, because it creates a problem. It creates a law which people will abide and some will therefore break. So that's the problem in itself.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'm conscious that members, Councillor Sellis, Councillor Ball, Councillor Butler, and comment, we haven't got a proposition on the table yet.
I'll come back to that. Yep. I was just about to ask questions. Any more questions? If there's no more questions, I'll go back to Councillor Mott to ask her to move the recommendations. Then we can get into debate.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In that case, I would like to move the recommendations as detailed on your screens. Can I have a seconder, please?
I'll second that. Crozier.
So, right. I mean, I'm conscious, Mr. Mayor, to help you out a little bit. There's all manner of
yes, I'll try and go back and pick up somebody.
Councillor Sellis was first, followed by Councillor Ball, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. Councillor Sellis.
Yeah, thanks. I have to say, Councillor Ridges, that people do bag the poo and don't dispose of it. I once picked up had the joy one tidy tabby picking up 21 bags of dog poo in a lane, and what does concern me is that in urban areas we do become urban centric, and I think I was guilty of that just now, actually. And I think what you were saying is absolutely right. You're much better having dog poo on the moor rather than bags. I pick it up. If I see my dog do it, I do pick it up, whether it's on the moor or whatever. And I only walk the dog on the moor. So I recognise your argument and I support it, actually. But in the little lanes in Tavistock, all the shortcuts and what have you, it's absolutely ridiculous. And I've had to work with the with Dill Lord and the localities team to try and get things sorted out. Councillor Hipsey and I've been discussing stuff like this, haven't we, Councillor Hipsey? And you know, there is a real urban problem. However, I think what you said, Paul, was absolutely spot on, actually. So I would consider that.
Thank you. Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, I'm problems with my button there. Yeah, I also have sympathy with Councillor Ridge's points. I'm obviously a National Park member, and I thought it would be interesting to go and look what the policy is. And the policy is very simple: bag it and bin it at home, as there are no dog waste bins provided. That's on the National Park, Dartmoor National Park's website in regards to dog use on the moor. I wonder if a further conversation with the national park on this will be pertinent. I understand what we're doing with this was, as Steve Molyneux pointed out, you know, the purpose of this is to actually set a framework that we can work off and I nearly said do our business with, but actually would be not probably appropriate, you know, but to sort things out with. But I wonder if the point that Councillor Ridge has made is actually a really important point. We do need to try and you know, kind of level that, because we don't want to be seen to be exasperating what already is a problem. So I just put that back, you know, as you know, is this a further conversation that needs to be had? It doesn't stop us, you know, passing the recommendation today, but it should be something that we should investigate in further detail, I think. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Southcott.
Right, sorry about that, a bit slow getting them, Michael. My concern with all this is quite often it's the towns and the villages where dog waste is a problem. Out on the moor, in woodland, places like that, open spaces away from major sites of population, I don't see a problem with this. It's far better to just leave it than pick it up and dump it in a plastic bag, and it just sits there. It's pollution in, you know, in its own right. I've got grave reserves about all this, to the point I will probably abstain on this discussion at the end of the day.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Renders.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Ball took a little bit of my thunder there, because I was going to make the same point that technically they should be picking it up and taking it home. Those are the rules. But I 100% am behind Councillor Ridges on this one. As you know, I cover, well, most of Dartmoor, and I sit on the National Park. I get more complaints from the locals about the village area, but most of them, when they're out on the moor, will tell you that, you know, the big problem is bags, and they are just left everywhere, and you couldn't feasibly police it. And that is a bigger threat to wildlife, having it in the plastic bags, than ever is. And we do the stick and flick. So I'm with you on that one, Councillor Ridges. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hipsey.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm obliged to Councillor Ridges for bringing this up, and like Councillor Renders and many other speakers, I'm very strongly concerned about the special situation we have on the moor and various other parts of the countryside, and I think that has to be really carefully thought out, and it doesn't really appear to be addressed in this report. Going back to the report itself, I'm obliged to Councillor Crozier for giving us a little bit of an idea about the uptake on the consultation, which is something I'm really concerned about. I still can't work out exactly how many responses there were, individual responses rather than to the various questions, but it does appear to be somewhat less than 200, possibly around the 100 mark, which I think over 2 months is just not enough evidence to base any of the decisions we're making on today, especially during a period of COVID where, let's face it, people weren't really in the mood to get worried about dog poo and so on and so forth. So I don't think it's really properly representative of public opinion, and I can't vote for this in favour of this report, given the very weak, I think, weak evidence that it's based on. I intend to vote against the adoption of this report. Thank you.
Thank you. The response from Oakhampton was quite vociferous to such an extent that the proposals that were put forward didn't get into this report. Councillor Ridges, you've made a statement here. Is it a recommendation?
is that, I mean, thank you very much, members, because there's some further points that have been added. I think, especially by Councillor Hipsey and Renders, this will be an environmental nightmare. You know, we have so much rain on Dartmoor, it's unbelievable, that washes it all away. What's the problem? And therefore we're going to start having a situation where it will be left in bags, and these bags are, you know, it's such a danger to livestock as well. You know, the farm, have we consulted with the moorland farmers on this? You know, well, we haven't, because we've only consulted with a couple of hundred people. I mean, and we're going to apply some, or by implication, some new rules and new laws that really will cause such environmental and animal welfare damage. I just can't, you know, I'm so concerned about this. Yes, the dog controls are just ideal for villages, for urban areas, but this just blanket approach is so wrong, and it really, really worries me. And when it comes back to this council that farmers' livestock have died by swallowing and eating this, then, you know, on whoever's heads be it. So my view is that we should be taking this off the table at the moment, and it's a good report. It's just far too broad. It shouldn't cover the Dartmoor National Park area and potentially some other rural areas. We haven't had enough consultation on it. The amount of people contributing it is too small, and I think it would be wrong to base a vote on this one tonight. That's my view, and I thank other members for contributing. And I'm sorry I'm getting a bit heated about it. I don't normally, but it really worries me from an animal welfare and environment and sustainability issue. Thank you.
No, that's fair enough. Can I ask Councillor Jury, because you want, and make a comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to say, from a rural perspective, I entirely agree with Councillor Ridges. It's my pet hate when you come to the end of a walk and there are trees festooned with plastic bags with poo in. And I have heard of dog walkers throwing them over fences and horses and livestock eating them and ending up with poo bags in their stomach. I do wonder whether, I mean, we clearly need this type of protection within our villages and towns. But I do wonder whether we could have an amended recommendation, perhaps within the report, to say that if you're outside of villages and towns, and if it is at all possible, you should bag it and take it home. But leaving poo bags will be a littering offence. Now, we haven't got the resources to police what is being proposed currently. It will just, I'm sure, lead to a continuation of the problem, if not an exacerbation of the problem. And I wonder whether we can perhaps say the right thing, but in effect, let the rural end of things sort of take care of itself almost.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Yelland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with all that's been said. This framework should apply literally to urban and village areas only, or where there's managed like parks, green space. Not all of Dartmoor National Park is in the West Devon Borough area, so even if we were to bring this forward as a blanket policy, anybody who is outside of the West Devon area but on Dartmoor would not be picked up, if you like, by any enforcement that we were actually doing. And I see it as unenforceable. I agree it's an environmental hazard, and that dog poo essentially is a degradable product. It naturally degrades in the weather, and it's far better that it is flicked or just left. There are other animals, carnivorous animals, if you like, that in the wild, foxes and whatnot, that poo quite happily, and that there isn't anybody to pick any of that up. So it's a natural byproduct of livestock and animals, and nature will deal with it in the way that nature sees fit. So I would agree that this perhaps document does need to go back with a little bit more work to perhaps look at it and see what areas it's actually going to cover rather than a blanket policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cheadle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be very brief. I've been a councillor for 7 years. I've been looking for something to agree with Councillor Ridges on all that time, and finally I've found one. I think he's absolutely spot on, and I think it's ridiculous overkill. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ewings, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not really going to say anything because Councillor Ridges, when he introduced the problems to livestock, answered or made the point very eloquently, as usual, Councillor Ridges. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Southcott.
Yeah, I just want to come back on that side of it. The plastic bags is a major problem, and out in the countryside, is this also going to apply to working dogs on the moor or out in the round? You know, it's unenforceable. It wants to go back and be fought over again, rethinked. It's too all encompassing. It's a nasty bit of, to my mind, as a dog owner, it's a nasty bit of work. I've had dogs for 40 years. We pick up where we have to, but out in the countryside, the rain deals with it. And down in the West Country, I've got some rain. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks very much. Councillor Mott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In response to the question about working dogs, the public order does not apply to working dogs, and the report is in line with the recommendation as detailed on Dartmoor National Park's website. In that, so if I can just bring it back up again, that the question of what to do with your dog poo, the response is to bag it and bin it at home, as there are no dog waste bins provided. However, given the strength of feeling from members, I am happy to withdraw the report, and we will consult with Dartmoor National Park on how they wish to apply this going forward, and to see if they want to amend their response and their recommendations, as obviously members feel that that is the way to go forward. And as I say, I am happy to withdraw the report and consult with National Park on this, if that is the wish of members.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got two others. I'll just give a chance to. I'll go to Councillor Hipsey first, please.
Are you happy for me to jump ahead of?
Yes, I want to go. Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I've just spotted another reason that I'm not in favour of letting this one through, and that is the proposal to fine people £100 for having no poo bags. I'm thinking about the situation where Joe Bloggs is walking along the street and he's down to his last poo bag. His dog does a poo, so what's he going to do? Is he going to pick it up and waste his part with his last poo bag, or is he going to pick it up and then find a bit further on, he comes across one of our localities officer who finds him £100? It just doesn't work. I'm glad Councillor Mott is thinking about withdrawing this, because I can't vote for it. Sorry.
Thank you.
In response to that, Mr. Mayor, it does detail in the paper without reasonable excuse.
Yes, it does. And Councillor Ridges, give you the last word on this.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I actually put in a comment just to come back. It was to Councillor Jury that what I was concerned about is that I think for the strength of the feeling is that we didn't try and rush something through tonight. But Councillor Mott has come back and said that she'd like to withdraw it, which I think is the wise and prudent thing to do. There's a lot of very good measures in here that I think all of us agree on, but there's some very fundamental areas where we disagree, or perhaps think let's maintain the status quo. So just very grateful for Councillor Mott to come back. I've got nothing further to add on that. Thank you for a good debate, members.
Thank you.
Thank you. In response to that, then, Mr. Mayor, if I could ask members please to email me with their concerns and to copy Mr. Loscombe in, so that we can look at this and discuss it further.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. White,
Mr. Mayor.
Do we just note that this has been withdrawn?
Well, the proposer has actually in effect moved a deferral. So if that's the wish of the meeting, I don't see we need to do a name vote for that. So if the majority rule is that this report be deferred and presented back at a future meeting, if I can invite any members to, if they're not willing to accept the recommendation, just to indicate in the chat box. Failing that, I think it's a vote for deferral and reporting back to a future meeting. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Fine.
And actually, Councillor Crozier has agreed, and he, of course, was the seconder of the initial proposition. So I think, thank you, members. I think, therefore, that report is deferred and to be reported back to a future meeting. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And right, and lucky for some, item 13, appointments of council bodies and other groups. Councillor Jury, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's a paper in front of you which outlines a change, proposed change to the list of substitutes for the Development Management and Licensing Committee, and some changes to the personnel of some other working groups. It's a pretty straightforward, I think, and self-explanatory paper. I'd be happy to take any questions.
No questions?
Which case I'd like to move the recommendation, which is on page 217. There are 4 recommendations, and I'm happy to take them on block.
Thank you.
I'm happy to second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any debate? Looks like we're debated out.
It appears not, Mr. Mayor. There's no members indicating a wish to debate this one.
Brilliant. Thank you. So just leaves me to say, I think this is broken.
So before we do, Mr. Mayor, I've just asked in terms of the vote on this one, if any, we'll do it by exception, obviously, but if any members aren't willing to accept it, just purely for the record, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry to steal your thunder.
By exception.
And again, Mr. Mayor, I don't think anyone is indicating a wish not to support this recommendation, so we will therefore take this one as unanimously approved.
Yeah, I think I must have been psychic there. But thank you very much for your time today. As I say, I think we've broken all records. We might be taking, we might be getting the same sort of habits as some of our neighbouring councillors. But thank you very much indeed. And all I can say is Merry Christmas and have a virtual mince pie and some sherry at some time.
Thank you,
Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well done, Tony.
Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
If we can
Good night,
stop.
Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Yeah, if we